All right, good evening, everyone. For those who have not yet met me, hi, my name is John Tabor. I'm the president of Loudon Photo Club, and I welcome you to tonight's peer critique event that we're hosting. We put these on periodically with the club, and for those who have not participated, the goal of this session is you can submit up to 2 images, and we, as a group, offer our critique of the image. What's good? What do we think could be improved? Some things that we can to try to maybe improve the image. And so we'll talk about all the things that usually go into judging a photo for competition: composition, lighting, subject matter, editing techniques, technical details. All of these are perspectives that we should be bringing to our critiques of tonight's images. These images were submitted to our gallery that we host online. The submitters may remain anonymous. You do not need to claim any of the images. However, if you do, feel free to engage with the critique. This is, again, it's a learning opportunity for us here. The goal is to improve everyone's photography. This is not a competition. This is not, nobody gets any points, no ribbons. it's just a good opportunity, to get better. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. Tonight, we've got about a couple dozen images, so we're going to spend maybe about 5 minutes on each image, average. So
John,
just keep that in mind. Yes, ma'am.
One quick question. After we hear the critique and we take our photo back and we work with it, are we allowed to use that photo for future submissions for content?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, there is no restriction on your use of these images or the feedback that you get. So you may do with it as you wish. And if you remember from our club rules, the only constraint is that if the image that you submit into any of our club competitions has placed in prior competition, it may not be submitted again. So as long as the image that you're looking at tonight has not placed in any of our previous competitions, you're free to do with it as you wish. All right. Any other questions before we get started? Okay, hearing none. So here's what happened. So again, I mentioned earlier that everybody submitted their images to the gallery that we host on our SmugMug portal. I downloaded all those images, made sure that any of the file names were anonymous, just in case somebody wanted to remain anonymous. And I have imported all those into Lightroom in the order in which they were submitted. So I don't know who submitted what. So if your name's not in the image, some of the submitters do have their names in the metadata. I'm not going to highlight that. So again, if you wish to remain anonymous, you may do so. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started here. So here is our first image. And I can certainly kick things off, but I would encourage somebody in the audience to kick us off with rendering their opinion. What do you like? What do you think might be improved? What would you like to try differently?
Well, I like the fact that it's seems like a very spontaneous kind of pose. So seeing the kids looking like in their natural habitat and natural behavior is a plus for me.
Okay.
I also agree with her that the kids look natural and not posed, and that they take up a significant part of the picture. The background is blurred. I like that.
A good separation from the background.
Yes.
It's not obviously staged. It looks natural. I love the expressions on the faces, especially this little guy over here on the left. Man, he is like, love it. Anybody else?
I really love that it's at their level. It's not looking down at them. That I really like.
That's good. And that's a very good point. Usually when you're photographing small children, you definitely want to get eye level. It makes it for a much more compelling image. All right. Anybody with some ideas for improvement?
Hmm.
I'll give a couple of ideas here. So one, it's spontaneous and you don't get always control on it. This is the only one of the 4 children
Right.
not looking at the camera. Doggone it. You can't always control it. They're kids. What are you going to do? I would also point out that the photographer did a good job with darkening the background a couple of not maybe a couple of stops, but certainly darkening the background significantly over the original exposure, adding more separation between the subjects and the background. How do I know they did this? So glad you asked. Look at this area here. See this little triangle right here and how much brighter it is than the surrounding soil? Also, over here between these 2 children over here on the right, notice how that background is significantly brighter than the rest of the background. So if we go over to Lightroom's Develop module and we go into our selections, we can select subject. And if you notice where all the red covers, I'll bet it covers, yep. See where I'm looking at? So there's that pink mask is in there. So what happened is then we can go in and duplicate and invert, for example. And now the background back here in the back certainly covers the area that's darker. So yeah, this is a really good technique. I fully endorse this, use it frequently myself. So it's a great way to help make your subject stand out from the background a little bit more. Just be aware that when you're using automatic selection tools in Lightroom, and they are phenomenal, make sure the mask is exactly where you want it and need it. Anybody else?
Is there a way to adjust that mask in Lightroom?
Oh, absolutely. Here, I'll show you real quick. I won't spend a whole lot of time on this, but so here, if we zoom in here, and I don't want that mask between these two children here, I can click on the subtract button and select any of our tools here. So I'm going to use a brush. And for this one, I'm going to leave auto mask checked on because it'll just, speed things along here a little bit. And what I'm going to do, I can get Lightroom to cooperate. There we go. That. And now I'm going to select brush. Okay, so watch as I'm using the auto mask feature, which basically, if you'll notice right in the middle of, here, I'll put it over here. Right in the middle of that circle, you'll see an even smaller circle with a minus sign in it. And now I can make it a plus sign. Whatever's underneath that minus sign in terms of color will be automatically selected within that circle. So as I'm holding down the mouse button and moving it, that's why it's picking certain colors and leaving the skin tones and the shirt in place. So as I take this down and just real quick, I'm not going to try to be super precise about this, but you can see how it's erasing the mask from that part of the background, which is what we want for a more natural effect that we want to apply. So now you can see it's not there. So if I brighten, we'll brighten the subject. So we'll raise them up a little bit. So as I move this to the right, you can see it brightens them. Now, if I go way over, it's obviously not natural. But just a quarter stop, maybe tenth of a stop, it pops them out of the background just a little bit more, and that part of the background is not being affected by this adjustment.
Could you invert that selection now and then bring the exposure down on that little piece?
The short answer is yes.
Okay.
So here's what I'm going to do. Since I've already done with the quote, the bad mask, I'm going to select that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring that exposure back up so that the background approximately matches that part of the screen. So I think that's close. It's not exact, but it's close. You can see that the brightness of this area is now somewhat blended well with that. So pretend that was what was submitted, just for the sake of discussion. Now that this is the mask that I adjusted. Now I can click over here, duplicate and invert. And now I can bring down the exposure of the background, and it darkens that part between those two children.
Yeah, that looks good.
So now, there's the original that was submitted.
Mhm.
Here's the edit that I just did.
Nice.
Yes, again, just if we're using, select sky or select subject, Adobe has got some really good technology behind those automatic selections. It works well for the most part. Just be careful, make sure that it's covering it's masking exactly what you want it to.
Do you mind showing where the subtract button was again?
Yes. So when you are looking at a mask, one of the masks or selections that you've done, and why is it not showing? Oh, I know why. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Where did it go? Okay. I will show it to you again. We will have opportunities to play with this.
Okay.
Hey, John, I think you have to create a mask, and once you hit the brush, it'll come up subtract or add.
Well, that's what I was trying to do. Oh, there it is. I had to click on the mask itself. Thanks. If you click on the mask,
Okay.
then the add and subtract buttons will come up.
Well, I learned something already.
See? All right, job done. We can wrap it up. All right. Unless there are any other urgent
Nope.
comments that somebody wants, we'll go ahead and move on to the next one.
I was just thinking about, and this is being nitpicky, but
Yeah.
that little triangle.
Carry on, a little triangle.
Can't hear you.
Oh, yeah, did she go on mute?
Mm. If I were being nitpicky, the only thing I might suggest is that boy on the left has that plant coming out of the back of his head. The others are placed like around him,
Yep.
that possibly you could clone those out.
That would be a great idea. Great idea. And again, this is one of those things, spontaneous. You got to capture the moment, right? So,
Right.
cloning that out in Photoshop is so easy. I wouldn't try it with Lightroom because
No.
getting right next to his hairline would probably introduce artifacts that would not be desired. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the next image. So here, I'll kick things off and suggest that this image, this photographer really needs to clean their sensor.
Is that rain or sweat?
Yeah. It looks like snow. It looks like he's out there with the Loudoun County Raiders, and I think they're the Raiders or the Vikings, can't remember. Anyway, Loudoun County High School.
Wait. And here's the thing.
That's great capture.
Where's my?
Any comments to kick us off?
Please.
Hey, John, those are the Loudoun County Raiders.
I thought they were the Raiders.
Well, they're now the captains.
Huh.
That's their new, it was during rain. It was early this
Captain,
year.
sorry.
Oh, so this is rain.
It's rain.
Oh, okay.
Was it a flash used and caused so much lightness in the rain? Just that much light?
No, there's that much light.
Yeah, we could tell in the background, the lighting at the stadium is apparently really good.
It is at the 50-yard line. If it's an end zone, it's not good.
Ah,
Mhm.
The
right. Any comments?
I think the exposure is just spot on and the shutter speed spot on. And the background is blurred, so it separates it, and gosh, captured that receiving perfectly.
Or was it a fake?
Or was it a fake? I don't know. Good point.
His arms are too far apart.
That's what made me think this might be a fake play.
Okay.
But I
You don't
wasn't
want to
there,
get in the
so-
way of him pulling his arm back to throw it.
Oh, okay. Learn something new.
All right, any other feedback?
I really like the photo. The action captures the moment. If I were to make one suggested change, is that I don't know if that's a roof of a car on the left, just
Mhm.
tone down the red and the roof.
Right.
Was the
But other than
quarterback's head?
that, it's right in the, just that's the kind of photography that I'm not good at, the action photography.
Uh-huh.
I think it's excellent.
Good.
And by the way, I missed the last few minutes because my connection froze up.
Oh, we were wondering what happened.
I had to leave and come back in. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you were in the middle of making a really good point, and right in the middle of it, you dropped out.
Yeah. Good old internet.
So I like the feedback about the car in the background, because that bright red, it is red. The human eye is attracted to red, so that makes it stand out a little bit.
Where's the car?
And
Up
plus,
here at the top left behind the quarterback.
You know, you could just desaturate red.
Absolutely. So you could go up there with a brush like we were talking about before, select the color and just desaturate that a little bit. And that would certainly help take care of that. Another thought that I had was maybe cropping this.
Yes.
Mhm.
Oh,
Yeah, so something, again, I'm just being quick and dirty here, but something like that, and we could easily clone out, the cleats down there. I mean, that zeroes in on where the action is. That was one thought, but sounds like somebody may have a different idea.
yeah,
I did, because when you go back to that, if you just showed us half of that number 44, that gives you the odd number comfort feeling. And it shows action.
Yeah, I agree. I think cutting them out doesn't show how close the other.
There, but
pictures
you
were.
have enough of 44 in there. That I like that
Yeah.
better.
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah, I think I would go a little less cropping on the right. The thing of when you cropped it, John, just the two of them, the sense of motion across from the left to the right across the image, kind of to me anyway, got lost. 44 really adds quite a bit, and then the lineman there in the original image, was big enough to kind of, I don't know, sort of block that sense of movement. And I mean, obviously he's there, but yeah, it's great. And
Get rid of the other guy's face. That's all you need to do.
And with the red, I did sort of notice it after a while, but because there was the red right in the middle of the picture, down at the field level, it kind of, I don't know, I didn't notice it as much, or, just my brain thought, oh, there's some more red, no big deal. But yeah, that's easy enough to take out of the picture.
Okay. Any other feedback?
Okay.
All right. Move on to the next one.
I'm sorry, I couldn't get off mute. I would at least crop it in so you don't cut him off right at the eye, the lineman, maybe it's like right at the side of the helmet or something like that. I would at least do that. I think at least that is better, but
yeah,
personal
rather than
opinion.
you split in half.
Yeah, so basically, I think what we're really driving at is that the technical execution on this image was pretty darn good. So we're having to nitpick to try to improve it. So well done on the photographer. All right, here we are with what I'm going to call kissing squirrels.
Well, they're cuter than the average squirrel. Most of those, I kind of go with the tree rat nomenclature.
Eyes are great.
Yeah, it's a great and real nice kind of symmetry and the sort of diagonal with the curve echoes their tails and nice texture of the bark, that complements their fur.
Anybody else?
I think I'd bring all the bark way down, darken it.
At
Okay.
least the vignette, maybe.
Yeah, I was thinking about a vignette around the edges, and then maybe doing a radial in the middle to bring out the squirrels a little bit.
Right.
I love that shot.
And that's great.
And it makes squirrels look like something you would enjoy to see.
Yeah.
They used to get into my tomatoes and it would drive me crazy.
So that's with a little bit of a vignette applied. And again, I'm just doing quick and dirty edits here. Yeah, but
Well, and that's nice because it also does some of that darkening of the bark that whoever it
exactly.
was comment made.
Could
I
you
don't-
could you put another radial in the middle where the
Yeah, where that light is.
bring those up, the squirrels up a little bit?
Oh, yeah. And maybe bring that circle down in the middle.
Yeah, that's the only problem is is in the middle there, that real bright
Oh, they're
spot.
sniffing.
If you do it that way.
You could do another, either brush tool or another radial.
Yeah, with a radial, just had to get the right tool because Lightroom was not my friend. And you're talking about brightening this up?
Just a little bit.
Oh, I see one.
But then that
Tail.
middle section might get too bright.
Okay.
Exactly. So
No,
that's so we could
Oh, no, the
we could
nose
play
is
around
up.
with some masking and balance that out.
Okay.
Two head. Okay,
Another
sorry.
thing that I noticed is, again, anytime we're shooting into a bright sky like this or a bright background with a subject, can you notice this purple fringing on his tail? Right
Yeah.
in this area? That is relatively easy to correct. Under lens corrections, just grab that little brush and click on that, and magic, most of that just went away.
And that was called fringing.
It's actually chromatic aberration, and when you're shooting when you're shooting a dark subject against a bright background, you'll see blue or purple and green or red,
Yeah, I've seen
or
green and
technically
red.
magenta. Yeah, but blue and purple are also common.
Sure, they're opposites. Yeah. No, I didn't even see the chroma. I thought you were talking about just the form of how the fur looks a little spiky on the backside there, but I didn't know
Nothing
if
you can
that
do
was
about that. Yeah, I mean that's just the nature of, again, you got that fuzzy part, and that's just going to blend into that bright background.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for showing that. I'd never noticed that kind of fringing.
Again, I was nitpicking a little bit. I thought this was really cute. The timing could not have been better for this image. They could have been fighting for all I know, but that the fact that you got that moment in time, whoever the photographer is, I thought you did a really good job.
At Meadowlark.
No clue. So unless the photographer wants to speak up.
It is indeed Meadowlark.
I was thinking this was the tortoise gem with the push-ups. Although these are technically turtles, right? Forgive me.
Yeah, painted, those painted turtles.
I don't think so. The painted turtles are definitely brighter.
I think they look like maybe red-eared sliders.
So is
So who has some feedback on this image?
Great repeating form, you know, it's almost rhythmic, and yeah, the turtle itself is this kind of ancient, almost sort of an archetypal form that yeah, great you know, contrast of light and dark, and the old masters would have been pleased. You know, Rubens and no, not Rubens. You know, the Dutch masters of light and dark way back when.
So John, I have a question about my own image and for others as well. So I somewhat struggle with this image in that, and this may sound strange, for me, cropping is often a difficult decision to make. What do you all think if that was cropped in from the top and bottom a little bit more? Because I didn't know if I was centering it too much or.
Well, with an image like this, I mean, you can, I don't know that it makes a lot of difference. Because
Yeah, I liked it better before you
you know, that's a 16:9 crop, you know, with them slightly off center. But frankly, it didn't bother me with this particular placement of the subject matter.
not at all. I agree.
It's got
I
some,
think it was nicely cropped on the ends too, because you got the end of the log on the one side, and then the, you know, shadow of, I guess that's trees that we can't see in the background, but you know, in the foreground, right, that shadow that's going along for, you know, so that there's a little band along the right side edge of the photograph. I think it's I like that one. It's a good one. Nice job, Daryl.
Thank you.
Any other feedback?
I have just
So-
a quick question.
Yep, go ahead.
So I'm not sure if it's the right area of like highlights and shadows, but I wonder if bringing highlights down, or maybe it would be like bringing contrast up to just kind of make them pop a little bit more.
So let's talk about that. So I'm pulling the highlights down, and it definitely takes some of the bright glare off of, you know, these shells. Now this one in the middle, you know, that's just a sun glare here. There's probably no detail there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
unless
almost no
you-
detail there.
Right.
So, but the bringing in the highlights definitely helped on the glare, the sun glare on the other shells. Definitely a good idea. And
But I noticed when you brought down the highlights of the water were also diminished. I would
Yes.
selectively, I would grab all the turtles in a separate layer and handle them by themselves.
well,
without-
frequently, yeah, and if you're doing, you know, without going into Photoshop with, you know, some additional touch-ups there, and you can also do that here in Lightroom with brushes, and
Oh,
you know,
okay.
we'll probably talk about that in a bit about selected by color or luminosity. But another thing to keep in mind is that if you're bringing down the highlights, it does tend to bring down the overall brightness of the image. So to protect those highlights, you bring the highlight slider to the left, and then to counter the brightness, you can bring the white balance, you know, to the white, not the white balance, but the whites back up. So if you notice, this was the original image. So that was the original. And bring down the highlights and the, you know, bringing the whites back up. So you bring it back a little bit more detail in the turtle shells and the water reflections. And another thing that I noticed on this one is the sun's obviously coming from the right, and there is apparently some trees there, and that is casting a shadow horizontally along the bottom. And while the shadow itself kind of helps with the vignette, I prefer, this is me, to control my own vignettes. Certainly I'll take advantage of Mother Nature when I can, but just an idea here. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a brush and I'm going to brush in. Oh, I just did do that. I want to brush not. Lightroom is. Okay, so I want to brush, and I do not want auto mask. So now I'm just going to brush this in real quick. And I'm going to bring the exposure up on that so to counteract that shadow. So now you can see that this is balancing out the water a little bit.
Hmm.
And there's still a little bit of a shadow down here on the left. So I'm going to take another brush and add it just in that area, bring that exposure up a little bit, just to balance this out a bit. And I don't think you need to be perfect with this. Now I, as the photographer, or Daryl, if he so chose, could do our own vignette by adding our own radial gradient here. Usually it helps for me if I zoom out to like 12.5% or something like that, so I can see the whole image. Now I'm going to invert this mask so you can see where the vignette's going to go. And I'm going to pull that exposure down a little bit, not much, just a little bit, to help guide the viewer's eye into the turtle. Now I go back up here. So here's the before, and here's after those edits. It's a little subtle, I'll admit, but you know, sometimes those little differences like that can make a significant difference. Cool. Any other feedback? All right, moving on. Got some climbers on a rock.
Must be at Red Rocks.
I think you're in the right state.
Canyon of the Gods.
Garden of the Gods, I believe.
That's where it is. It's at Garden of the Gods near Denver.
Any feedback?
It almost looks too red.
Until you've been there, then you know.
I haven't been there, so I can't say.
I'd like to see a little more blue in the sky.
Yeah, and maybe I don't know, maybe it was you know, afternoon, evening. When I was there, the rocks were not quite that red. Then, you know, it also kind of, then you get into the whole you know, aesthetic philosophical discussion of, you know, saturation, realism, or, you know, you're making an image, you know, what works, what doesn't. I don't know. That's, for me, that's a little redder than I would ideally like it, but I really like the perspective, and the guy, the lower climber, kind of reinforces that, you know, with his sort of reaching posture, kind of like reaffirms the pointing of the rock into the sky, you know.
Also lends a bit of the action to the scene as well.
Yeah,
I like that. Any other feedback?
I kind of think I'd want to maybe pull it out a little bit. You see the little bit of tree on the left, but I feel like if you saw more of a tree line, it'd give you an even greater idea of just the magnitude and how high they really are.
Definitely a thought. Going in tighter might also make it a more compelling image as well, maybe. But yeah, getting more context around it could certainly help place the viewer on just how high up they are, and just how good a lens that that photographer has to zoom in and get that close, for example. Any other feedback?
Also I'm curious what everyone's thoughts are on, you know, people that will sometimes Photoshop clouds into sky, or they'll Photoshop a different sky into an image. If that's something that's generally kind of frowned upon, or if it can help a photo.
Well, as far as the club rules go, that's fine. I mean, there's no restriction on the kind of manipulation that you do to your images. In this case, I think you're onto something. And the reason I say that is in this particular instance, so this is, let's zoom into 200% just so we get to see this a little bit better.
No data.
Well, exactly. All
It's
the
all blown
highlights
out,
are
right?
completely blown out. Right. So in a situation like this, and again, it could be that the photographer just showed up and, oh, there is a moment, must capture the moment. So focus on capturing the moment and deal with the follow-up shot if you need to fix it, if you will, if it's over or underexposed. In this case, this is a key example why highlighting and protecting, exposing for those highlights, protecting those highlights is really valuable, because here, there's just nothing you can do with this guy. The clouds, there's no detail there. There's obvious that there were clouds, and it would have been nice to be able to see them, get those details. And I think it was KD that was talking about doing a sky replacement, and this is a perfect example of where it might be a good idea.
What would happen if you wanted to keep that image, crop it to the right so you actually lose the tree and part of the sky, and then bring out with the shadows under at least the bottom guy, so you pull out the shadows a little bit. So for me, when I look at that, I still get the sense of height there and not having to worry about the sky.
Yeah, when you pull in tight, it becomes a different kind of picture, and the sky is largely irrelevant. That there is a sky replacement tool lends some idea, or lends to the idea of that being considered acceptable.
Yeah, and this is a case, and Photoshop makes it easy to do with sky replace. Select the sky, and here I can demonstrate it, because even in Lightroom, we have a select sky option now, and you'll see that all of this area at the top will now be masked. Now, again, pay attention to these gaps up here, because that mask is not as dark as it is outside of it. So you want to get in tight, make sure you're doing the selections really well. So that could be, you can't do the sky replacement just yet in Lightroom, but that same technique is in Photoshop. So if you subscribe to Adobe Photography Edition, you get access to Photoshop as well as Lightroom, and you can do a sky replacement easily in Photoshop. And there are other tools as well that do that. The other thing that I wanted to highlight here, go ahead.
Since you just mentioned that, so I think if we use one of the canned skies that comes with Photoshop, then we can't enter it in contest, right? Because that's not our work. You have to use your own sky.
That is the rule. That is correct.
And
So
who wants
you're
to
taking
paint
so
photos of
anyway,
your
right?
own
We got a lot of people
skies?
talking. So say that again.
So if you've taken your own photos of your own skies, you can use them to replace a sky in your own photo and still enter it into a contest?
According to our rules, that's correct.
Do you know most of the other contests if they accept that, or it has to be the original sky?
I don't think PhotoVisions would accept that
Okay.
unless you put it in the other category.
That's
Okay,
correct. You could do photo art and submit it. But for nature, I think that if they caught you out on that one, they might throw out the image.
okay.
But yes, I would encourage everyone to have a collection of skies that they think is interesting. And it's a valid concept, and you never know when you're going to be putting together a composite image at some point. The other thing that, let me deselect this mask here. The other thing about this particular image is the sharpening is rather strong. So this is at 100%, and crunchy is probably the best way I could describe it. And there is just a hint of haloing against this bright sky, but we definitely need to sharpen most of our images coming out of the camera. So there's no problem with sharpening in and of itself. But it can be taken farther than may look natural. If I use the texture slider here and I just pull it to the left a little bit, you can see it pulls away some of that crunchiness. And, we can zoom in a little bit. So here's the original.
Yeah.
And, just pulling down that texture just a little bit. And this is where it's really up to the photographer on how much sharpening they think is best for that image and the feeling that they're looking for. But in this particular case, I thought it was slightly over sharpened for my taste on this. Any other feedback? Moving on. We're doing on time. About 40 minutes into this. All right. Five images done. Well, I need to pick up the pace a little bit. All right. Nice little lights set out on a small island.
The snowman could come down a little bit.
You mean in highlights?
Yes.
Okay. Try that, see how that looks. Yeah, the detail is in there. So maybe something like that's what you're thinking?
Yes.
I
He
think I
loses a
might
little of his
crop it.
cheeriness with,
Yeah, I would crop the tree out.
Oh, not the tree. I wouldn't crop the tree, but I'd crop starting at the left of the little island.
Mhm.
I mean, just pull the left edge into like that.
I don't know.
I agree in general that if the subject is the island and the snowman and the tree, that there's a lot of other picture that's, yeah, I think I would want to crop some of the horizontal extent.
Yeah, well, we could make it a 8x10 maybe and see how that looks.
Mhm.
So what do we like about the image?
Well, there's, the color jumping out from the otherwise,
Drab.
dark or muted background. And there's sort of a sense of humor also, to me anyway, in the picture.
How did Frosty get out there to begin with?
When it was frozen, the night before, I think he scooted across. How does electricity get over there?
Well, I actually thought about that one too. Any other feedback?
What about cleaning up the water in the lower left corner?
Yep, that's a good observation. So using the healing brush might work well. Lightroom usually does pretty good with this type of stuff. And just a little quick cleanup there. Not necessarily final for publication, but give you an idea. What else?
I like the blue hour with the
Blue hour.
lights.
Let's talk about that. I like where you're going with that. So it's blue. Is there
Not
something we could
necessarily
do?
Blue hour. Yeah.
Well, what if we pull down and you make it just a little bit deeper into the blue hour, so to speak?
Okay.
It pulls out some of that detail in the clouds in the sky, which for me adds a little bit more interest. But pulling down the exposure all by itself does darken the lights a bit more than I would want. So how can we fix that, you ask? So glad you asked.
Oh.
We can go up here to the brush and I'm just going to, just paint over all this again, not doing auto mask. So just give me the brush and I'm going to highlight over all of the lights here. And now we can bring up the exposure or the whites, right? So we'll bring up the whites. Oh my goodness, that is horrible, right? So don't want to do that. But here's what we can do. So up here on the mask, I'm going to select the brush. And now I'm going to say intersect with luminance. What is this going to do? So if you've ever heard anybody, like on a YouTube video or in a photography related article, talk about luminosity masks, that's what this is. I'm going to click luminance range, and now I'm going to, and if you've never used this before, let me give you a quick overview. That the left side are your darks, the right side are your highlights. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pull this left edge, I'm going to click on it, and I'm going to drag it to the right. And as I move it to the right, you're going to start seeing the darker areas of this mask drop out. See what's happening? So it's staying selected on the bright spots. So I can pull this way over here to the right, and I can smooth it out a little bit by this little triangle down here. I can smooth that gradient a little bit. And it's, still selecting a little bit of that sky, but you know what? That might be okay. Let's try it. Let's see how that looks. So now that I've got that selection, I'm going to bring the whites up a little bit on that. And now you can see that it's much more selective about where that adjustment is applied. So if we were to do something like that, maybe do a radial gradient on this. So let me jump out to 12% on that. We'll take my radial gradient.
We could increase the saturation on the tree on the ground to yellow it up a little bit to contrast or to complement the blue, like the one in the water, which is yellower.
Yep, I'll take a look at that in just a second. Let me bring this down just a little bit, add just a little bit of a vignette. All right, we'll do that. And Jack, you were saying what?
Yellow up the tree on the land a little bit.
All right, so we can.
Yeah, the one in the water's
brighter.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, brighter, and I guess there's a little bit of movement maybe in the water because you get, there's a lot more lights in the tree in the water.
All right, so we can do this. And again, I'm going to intersect that with luminance, similar type of mask, just bring that over. And add just a touch more yellow. The other thing we could do is we could use a similar technique in the water and tone down the exposure on that part a little bit. But again, I definitely not trying to edit this for competition entry as much as just demonstrate the types of techniques that you can use to, change your own images in a way that you would see, creative or beneficial.
If it was me, I would brighten up the snowman's face to match his body.
Yeah.
So real quick, come in here like that, just click.
Yeah.
There we go. Now, if you do there, you got to do it in the water too. Don't forget those reflections. Oh, speaking of reflections, if you do want to try sky replacements and you got water or some other reflective surface in the front, don't forget the reflections.
I don't think there's a reflections replacement tool though, is there?
There are techniques to do that in Photoshop, but you're definitely getting into the advanced category with that technique.
Ain't me.
All right, let's move on. I'm going to guess bacteria mat at Yellowstone.
That's Yellowstone. Yes.
There may be some fungi in there as well, and minerals.
What do we like about this?
I like the texture.
The colors.
I like the
The
curving
abstract.
shape in the center.
mean-
Say again about the center.
I like the curving shapes in the center.
I'm hearing a lot of references to shapes and textures.
Black and white.
Aha, you read my mind.
Mm-hmm.
What would it look like just clicking it over?
Mm,
Kind of
yeah,
flat,
good luck. I
but
mean, you can probably massage it to make it more interesting, but even though the colors in the
look at that.
original are not,
Yeah.
you know, real all that outstanding, they add a lot compared when you take them away. It's like, oh, becomes a lot flatter.
Mm-hmm.
I like
Yeah.
that. You increased the blacks, didn't you?
I increased the contrast.
Or the contrast, yeah.
Yep. So that's all I did is I just moved the contrast slider. Other things you can do, and this is where, you know, if you're not familiar with this, you'll notice that when I switched it to black and white, all I did was click the black and white up here in the basic panel. The HSL tab was changed to B&W, but you still have your colors. So this is where you can actually change the nature of your black and white by adjusting individual color channels in a black and white image.
Cheating, in other words.
Say that again.
I said cheating, in other words.
Oh, these are all black. These are all darkroom techniques. So
Right.
yeah, definitely.
No, I'm kidding. It's just
Yeah.
making
like using
making color
filters.
adjustments to a black and white photograph.
Yeah.
Just
Sounds
using
like a
filters on your
contradiction in
enlarge.
terms.
I was going to say that's just like using filters in the dark room on the enlarger.
Absolutely. Another thing that you could do here is if we increase the saturation here, watch what happens. Now, if you've been to Yellowstone, you know that these bacteria mats they can be extremely vibrant, is probably just the
Oh,
best way I
yeah.
can describe it. So it may be that, you know, just a little bit of vibrance and saturation gets it close to what it was in real life or not. And, you know, I'm just playing around with different editing techniques. That's all I'm doing here. Any other
Yeah.
feedback?
The turquoises at Yellowstone are just breathtaking sometimes.
I was just going to ask if there were any blues.
Does not appear to be in this image.
No, yeah,
But this is another case. I think it was Alton that was talking about the curves in the middle. You know, so don't be afraid to, you know, just crop the heck out of these
I was
images
yeah.
and just zero in on, you know, something that, you know, and again, I'm just using this just as an example, not necessarily what I think would be ideal, but, you know, identify an area, a smaller area within the image that might make for a really interesting abstract and just focus on that. All right, any other feedback? All right, let's move on to the goldfinch.
Ooh, pretty. That's gorgeous.
Yeah, photographers always love to hear that, oh, reaction.
Very artistic.
Yeah, I was gonna say
Treatment.
it looks like a painting.
Gauzy, misty.
You know, when I first saw this, when I thought it might have had a painterly effect added to it, like, you know, topaz painterly, I don't think so. I think this is, you know, there's probably some misty type filter effect, you know, that the photographer used. But when you look at the sharpness of those poppies there in the middle, I think they're poppies, but they're sharp. They're definitely not yet a thistle. They're definitely not painterly. So the photographer did some really interesting processing on this one. Any other feedback?
I just love it. I love the colors. I love how bird's wings seem to be spanned with that space below it, the green space below it. It just, the placement of it is just great.
Well, you know, one of the things, I don't know what the shutter speed was on this, but if he, you know, he may have had a shutter speed just right as to give that bird motion and the aperture wide enough that the only thing that's really in sharp focus is those poppies. So maybe in just, you know, a really perfect combination of f-stop and speed to give a lot of that effect.
John, what would happen, just real quick, what would happen if you pulled up the shadows just a little bit on the wings?
Just on the wings?
Yeah, I think I like the photo. I'm just curious what the,
I think what I like about those wings, that the shutter speed is just enough to show movement in the wings, but not a blurred photo.
Yes, I think that was Daryl asked me about the shadows, and that's pulled up 100% there. Yeah, we could play with the black point and the shadows in combination to pull that up a little bit. But of course, if I pull it to blacks, it also
right.
brightens up the yellow. Yeah, we could definitely get more constructive with our masking if we wanted to do that.
It's a beautiful picture.
The only thing that I would suggest next time the photographer's out in this area looking, you know, working with this particular model, get the model to turn more toward the camera. And it's usually real easy to do with these chicks. I mean, birds. Good work on this one. I like, and you've heard a lot of it. I think the vignetting on this one is good. I don't know whether this misty effect that I'm calling it was because it really was in a foggy morning or added in post. Don't care. Think it works well. Anybody else?
Wish I'd taken
So pretty.
Let's go talk about the levitating dog.
Beautiful.
I admit that's mine. And I figured out high key, you know, with the shadow and everything. And I really like doing low key images. But and with headshots, I'm fine. But, I just want to make it look less floaty. And if you guys got ideas, I want them.
Gray backdrop. If you get just like a neutral gray backdrop, like a cloth backdrop that you could put over the soapbox or what apple box, whatever he's sitting on, and then do like an infinity wall behind that. The gray, you get total control on the lighting because you're obviously using flash. So if you got the flash on a low power, you can make that gray drop almost black, but you could have just enough light, for example, so that the dog's not floating, as it were. That's one technique, not necessarily the only one.
Well, the reason I like to use the black when I'm doing low key is some of his fur can catch the light.
Mm-hmm.
And so I like to use the black backdrop. I was just wondering if there was something I could put underneath of him to make him look less floaty. He's a good boy.
Yeah, I mean, but so you could certainly, I see where you're going. So you like the black backdrop.
Yeah, I was going to do like a
plexiglass. But you want a base of some sort, is what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, again, I mean, going with the low key theme there, you could get a really dark gray cloth to drop over the. I'm apple box, whatever he was on.
He was on the floor.
Well, in that case, I'm not going to be able to quite do what I had in mind. But I see where you're going. The challenge here is this is a great image for being, we were talking about compositing earlier. This would be a great image for a composite. You could place this little pup pretty much anywhere in a, you have a living room photo for an architectural, trying to sell somebody's home. You just took a bunch of architectural photos. You can drop this little bad boy right in front of that fireplace, instant sale. So this technique for that purpose, fantastic. If you're actually trying to give a little sense of, yes, there really is something grounding this puppy, you're just gonna have to use a different color of some kind.
What color would you recommend? And I
Well,
thought about plexiglass, but I know it's kind of expensive.
Yeah, it can be. And, as somebody who works with black plexiglass on a somewhat regular basis, you're asking, especially with puppies, you're going to get it scratched. You're
Mhm.
going to have a heck of a time with fur that you're going to need to
Static
clean up off the
electricity.
reflection. So plexiglass, great idea. Lots of challenges. If you're willing to put up with those challenges, by all means, I think it's a great idea to do it. If you're looking to stick with the low key concept, I would recommend like a dark navy, a dark gray, or something again that's going to be just enough color in the final image to give the viewer a sense of grounding, like I was talking about before, that this puppy is not magically levitating, without destroying the low key concept that you were going for. But
Okay.
it would need to be dark, but not black. I mean,
Okay.
not so black that it disappears is my point. So if you're using, I don't know, I've got some felt, for example. It's not ideal for this purpose necessarily, but it's a black felt. But when you're using a flash, it catches on the fibers of the felt, so you know that there's felt there. It's not just blackness. Those are my ideas. Anybody else?
So you're
Why don't you
working
use
on an
blue?
Elvis painting, John.
Just a dark blue. Then you can control it since the dog doesn't have any blue in it.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, so basically what you may be saying is that using color selection in Lightroom or Photoshop, you could adjust the tonality of that blue. Is that what you're talking about?
Absolutely. Yeah, just as long as you've got an independent color that won't cross over with the subject.
I'm a Photoshop user, so I don't know Lightroom that well, but there is a tool like for object selection, and you can, it will get the outline of the dog, and then, and you have that on one layer, and then you can put whatever background you want behind it.
The only I did that with a rabbit one time, and the problem was no matter how good the selection is, you still, I don't know what you would call it, like a bleed through or
On the edges.
Yeah, because fur is really hard to mask. I mean, it's not that easy.
And that's exactly what I was thinking when you were trying to get these hairs. I mean, so you did a good job with the lighting on this. I mean, no blown highlights. I mean, you exposed it really, really well.
Yeah.
But these edges, if you try to mask this, can you do it in Photoshop? Much easier than Lightroom. Yeah, sure, you could in Photoshop. It's a lot of work to get this type of mask done right.
Sure is.
Yeah, I just want something easy to make him look grounded. I almost thought before I submitted this image of taking and adjusting the exposure underneath of him just to make it look lighter.
That's why I was
That would
wondering if you
work.
could take a linear gradient and just lighten it a little, or a radial gradient around him and lighten it just a little bit, subtracting the subject.
But this is where Fred's idea about using, something underneath the subject that's of a consistent color. Fred, Jack was talking about object selection, subject selection in tools in Photoshop. You can also select specific colors. or color ranges.
Mhm.
And, so Fred's idea might be a good way to go. And, and you can find tutorials on YouTube, for example, on how to do color replacement in Photoshop. So you can, they walk you through how to select a particular color range, and how to pick a new color and drop it in, and it looks seamless. I mean, I've watched them change, a model's dress color completely different, and it totally changes the impact of the image, for example.
Patty, was
The
there any kind of
Topaz mask
shadow
tool
on the dog
that
at the
Does
bottom?
better.
Yeah,
He-
so
I
Fred
what
had
I
an idea.
did was I had the black backdrop. It's a cloth, and I swept it all the way down on the floor,
Mhm.
and he was laying on it.
Yeah, so basically it's like an infinity wall, coming under all the way underneath the puppy and curving up into the background.
Right. But
Right.
there's still no shadow from the lights.
There were. That's what I struggle with, because with the direction of the light, there was a little bit of a bright spot, but then I took that out. But then, the rest of him still looks kind of floaty. I just
wonder if the shadow, if you hadn't completely darkened the shadow, if maybe that would have grounded him some.
Yeah.
There's a thought.
Well, that's why I was saying I thought about going back and using like the exposure and then brightening it up around underneath of him. So I don't know.
Yeah, if I try that here with this JPEG, it's just going to be horrendous, because all that shadow detail is gone in this JPEG.
Yeah.
Another example, I'm assuming, Patty, this is yours as well.
Yes.
It looked like the same subject, but I didn't want to assume.
Mhm.
No, that's him.
Like
Yeah.
the backlights.
He was being a good boy.
Mhm.
I was trying a technique that I saw Gavin Hoey do, and
Oh,
I actually used an umbrella, believe it or not. But then I angled it. That's on the right side, and then I tried it without lighting him on the back, and it just looked a little bit too dark. So I put a speed light on the left side and had it sort of angled toward him, but coming towards me, so I could get a nice rim light on his back.
yep. Well done.
Thanks. He behaved too.
Beautiful. Look at
And
that
here,
face.
in the eye, you can see the reflection,
Mhm.
Of
the catch light.
umbrella.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
He was being a
Yeah.
good boy.
Yeah, he's a nice dog. I want to
I
pet
might
him.
even crop that just to have just like the face.
I was just thinking the exact same thing. Yeah, because when it was zoomed in there, let's change the aspect ratio a little bit, make it more like this.
So beautiful. Oh,
Um,
yeah.
Oh yeah, I
Very
like
nice.
that. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Little floaty issue.
Yep, took away
We-
that problem, didn't it?
Yeah, that's the thing. If you just do the headshot, or you eliminate the bottom half, you don't have to worry about it being floaty.
Yeah.
Yeah, but great subject. Again, you're controlling your lighting, your exposures really well. And I like, because again, when you're somebody who's tried this technique a few times, it's easy to lose detail here in the front. And so I like the fill light that you've got going on here. You handle the light really well in this.
Thanks.
Any other feedback?
Well, there is a Topaz tool that works really well when you're trying to mask, separate out the background and the subject with hair that I have.
Yeah, what is that? It's not AI mask. Is it just Topaz mask? I know the one you're talking about. I used it a time or two, but I don't
it's
do enough
called Mask
masking. to keep
AI.
it. Mask AI?
Yeah, I think so.
Well,
Topaz
Mask AI is
AI.
the new one. I had the one before the AI.
Yeah, that's the one I had, was the one before the AI. It was still a really powerful masking tool. Anyway, let's move on to the next one. Who wants to kick us off?
Love Freeman.
Spain or Italy, yeah.
Very nice.
Probably someplace in Europe.
It's Portugal.
There we go.
Yeah.
Very well done.
Yeah, nice framing with the arbor, I guess you'd call it.
It was, yeah, a patio with an arbor.
Okay.
I think I
Frames up
might
the
have, this
view.
is maybe a little nitpicky compared to the whole landscape, but the vine that's kind of hanging
Right.
out there at about 10 o'clock, I think I
Right.
might have turned that into cloud.
I looked at that one and the one below it and thought, do I clone these out or leave them? Because it certainly shows vines, but I think, I don't know.
So I was playing with this one earlier.
Mhm.
I think you and Jack are on the right track. And just to do this quick and dirty in Lightroom, I think Photoshop will do a much better job of this, but turn this into clone. I think, that's a similar technique up here. Just again, this is not necessarily for competition worthy, folks, but just to illustrate the technique
Mhm.
and the effect.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy. Some places are a real pain in the ass to do, but that is
True,
Right.
but just cleaning up a few of these, like, again, really quick and dirty. I'm embarrassed that I'm
well,
just going
yeah,
this
and it's
quickly
sort
on
of
this.
like yellow Volkswagens. Once you see one, now it's like, oh God, little bits of vine everywhere now.
Yeah, and then the really other one that I thought was
Yeah.
really atrocious was that one. So just that alone, I think, and I'll zoom back out here. So here's the before and the after.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that little bit of cleanup does a lot.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, what else?
Yeah, I'm really with that loop, especially out of the way, the sort of curving, the lighting on the clouds there, and the back. Yeah, I mean, it's just there's a wonderful gradient, and yeah, I love it. That's great.
Thank you. That was one of the few days we actually saw some blue in the sky. It was so hazy all the
Yeah, so,
time.
so speaking of blue,
Mhm.
I'm going to move this dehaze slider to the right just a little bit, just a little. So again, there was the original. Is it a huge difference? No, but that's kind of the point. A little
Mhm.
subtle addition there.
Okay.
And
Okay.
that little bit also helped pull out a little bit more of the contrast in the middle of the
Right.
scene.
Right.
There's the before, there's the after.
Yeah, looks good. Yeah.
Can you increase the blue saturation without, it seemed to make it kind of darker as well.
Yeah, and that's where, again, usually you want to balance out something like that with either a white or an exposure balance. You could also, you can certainly go down to HSL, like Jack was suggesting, and increase just the blue saturation.
Mhm.
That may give you the effect. But again, this is like, how many different ways can we achieve this goal?
Right.
There's no one perfect answer for everything, but these are all ideas to achieve the same effect, which is to bring out a little bit more of that, because you got some really nice interest in the cloud, in the skies. So you got some nice, good clouds mixed in with the blue. So some way to bring that out a little bit better with maybe just a little bit more saturation is what we were playing with.
Okay.
With having done that, I would be inclined to lighten up the darker hills to give it a little more sunny effect
Mhm.
at a distance.
Yeah.
That's one way to look at it. I kind of like the contrast of the way it is, because this, the contrast gives it a little bit. Now we could get a little more detailed with specific dodging and burning, but you can see over here, for example, after those adjustments we did, the detail in the contours of the land here came out just a little bit more. there's the original, there's the after. It's really subtle, but again, subtlety can go a long way here. Can we do some dodging and burning and bring out some of those contours a little bit better? Yeah. Is it worth the effort? Maybe, maybe not. Leave that up to the photographer.
I
Yeah.
actually did use the brush on a lot of the different where the light and the dark separated.
Yep.
Yeah.
Definitely helps. Definitely helps
And
bring
that's
out
a
that
vineyard
contrast.
there, Susan?
Vineyards and olive trees.
Uh-huh.
So I'm
Nicely
gonna
done.
point out something else. I think this photographer, I'm not going to call her out, but I think this photographer may have attempted some focus stacking on this one.
I did not.
So here's what
I originally did. In fact, when I first got it out of camera, I took 3 different photos and combined them, and I got so many artifacts along the edges of the hills that I just decided to go with one photo, because I'm not real experienced with focus stacking. And
so here's what, yeah, and I get it. And so this one I think would be a challenge to focus stack anyway, mainly because of these leaves. And this is what led me to think that maybe you had, because over here, this vineyard, nice and sharp, nice and sharp, nice and sharp, nice and soft, leading into the edge, the leaves over here, where notice
They are
the
sharp again.
notice the, well, I'd expect the front, if she had done the focus stacking, that would be the goal. But notice that the background behind these leaves is bright,
Yeah.
much brighter than the hill.
I probably brushed over those hills and made them darker than the trees right in front of them. And then, yeah.
Similar effect over here as well.
Okay.
So again, it got sharper and then softer. So it was that haloing is what I'm going to call it, that led me to think, oh, I'll bet this person did some focus stacking. I'm nitpicking here. It
I'm
would be
glad you're
relatively,
pointing that out, because
it
I
would,
would not.
especially in Photoshop. It's
Mhm.
really easy to fix that. So all you need to do is just get a brush with, basically you can put a layer mask, layer on top of the subject, get a brush and set it to darken mode only, not normal.
Okay.
And you can pick a local color there and just lightly brush over those areas, and it will darken without taking away any of the foreground color or texture. But little things like that, if that haloing were not there, I would have had no clue that that center, I would have looked at that and said, man, I don't know how she got that exposure that well balanced.
It
So
is
John,
just one exposure, but also I will say that this was kind of a hurry up and take the shot, because they were moving us through so quickly. So,
I totally
is
get it.
Is it the hyperfocal distance that you calculate where everything is in focus that are?
Well, everything is within acceptable focus.
Yeah, well,
Acceptable sharpness, I should say. Every lens has their hyperfocal distance. And if you use a zoom, you'll need to know multiple hyperfocal distances for that to really take effect.
John, just a quick question. So when I look at this, my first impression was I was very impressed, whether it was taken like this or brushed in. And everything you were saying very helpful as I look at this image. One of the questions I have is, if this was entered in a competition, because I don't know, I've never been a judge, I don't know how judges go about their thing. But do the judges pixel peep, or are they looking at the image as a viewer would look at the image as it was hanging on a wall? I mean, how
I think
close
it
do you actually
varies.
get to an image to look at it to decide?
I think it varies. So some of the judges have indicated that, for example, they'll definitely go into 100% and move around the image, to see. I mean, it may just be a really interesting image. They want to see it bigger. And I've also seen judges, even with prints, get down and really get close to a print, for example. So some judges like to see fine detail in the image, but other judges, they'll just leave it at full screen like that, and however it appears, that's what they use.
Because I look at that image and my first reaction was, wow, that's a nice image.
Thank you.
Oh, it is a nice image. I mean, I'm not,
Yeah.
I'm nitpicking on some of these guys.
Yeah.
I mean, these are just fine.
No, I get that.
Some of these I have to struggle with. Find
I am
something to
glad you
improve.
pointed that out. That's why I submitted it, because, you know, when you're working on your own photo and plus you got your emotions about the trip all combined in it as well, it's sometimes hard to see, you know, what you need to correct and what you need to
Yep.
fix.
Yeah.
The only, I'm gonna be like John, I'm gonna nitpick too. The only thing that stood out to me is
Mhm.
your bushes in the front and
Mhm.
how they're kind of inclining.
They are.
Yeah,
That's
that to me was
because,
the first thing that my eye went to, because you got the contrast between the dark green and the light green, so it really stands out.
and you know what? I brightened that lighter green because those actually aren't part of the arbor. That's down further. Those,
Yeah, I got that.
yeah, but the thing that bothered me the first about that image right there is like that.
Yeah, something like that I think would be better.
Mhm. Okay, well, I already did that some, but I could do it more. It's just that, yeah, I didn't want to cut off the frame completely, and that looks
Well,
better.
yeah, and I was about to say, you know, cutting out some more of his frame, I don't think it's going to detract it. I think
Okay.
that's still a compelling image.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah. You know, I mean, I think the whole horizontal line issue and vertical, I think plays differently. I mean, if you have a structure with right angles, okay. But here, assuming that the foreground is exactly horizontal is an assumption, and
Mhm.
it's you know, plants, and they don't do, you know, straight lines and right angles too much that I've seen.
This
So
is, yeah, this isn't a straight, this is not straight land. That was a little, in
Yeah.
fact, that's the way Portugal was. They did an awful lot of terrace kind of gardening because very few flat parts, at least where we visited.
Yeah, and this is, we're talking about basically the difference between the reality of standing there and how the viewer responds to it, to an image as it's presented. And you know, I think Tim brings up a fair point that, a viewer could stand into this and say it feels a little off balance. Would something like that improve it?
Yeah,
I'm gonna
I
leave it
think
out to the
does.
photographer.
Mhm.
All right, let's move on to the next one.
Thanks for the feedback.
nice shot.
Mhm.
Love the symmetry of it.
Yeah, and the kind of Palladian-like window above,
Mhm.
there's almost her hands that it's like there's almost this sort of visual echo or symmetry of her hands, I guess, and the curve of the window above the square window. That's kind of cool. I think I would have had a little bit less light in the very, you know, center bottom. I think I would have toned that down just a little, but
Comment
you
under the
know,
window.
also I'll have an idea, and then when you try it out,
Mhm.
then how it looks may turn out different. No, never mind, you know. So, but that was kind of I guess also because you've got that repeating pattern of the tiles around the edges, and then it becomes, you know, the stone at the bottom. It kind of accentuated the light and dark.
You know, I think part of that might have been some vignetting, but I had to go back and look at the original because I thought, wow, what have I done that I got this bright? But it was not. That's the original stones had that for some odd
So
reason.
that's, so I was looking at that as well. And playing with this a little bit earlier, I
Mhm.
think, a similar technique that I was using with the turtles, where I'm going to come in with a brush. I'm just going to paint in a little bit on these parts. And
Okay.
I'm going to make this a really big feather on this one. And again, this is not just quick and dirty type stuff. So now I'm going to raise that exposure a little bit to help
Okay.
balance it out with the rest of that stonework.
Right.
If I carry it too far, it's
Right.
going too far the other way. So just enough to balance it out a little bit, and maybe add a second brush over here, just to help again balance this out just a little bit more. Now you get full control over the vignetting, and you can
Right.
put it the way you want it.
Right.
Yeah, it kind of gets back to my earlier point where I want to control the vignette.
Right.
And it's funny, I had sort of the inverse of what you just did, John. I was thinking, well, I'd like the kind of tone and light darkness of the bottom left. I'd like that all the way across that band at the bottom, not
yeah.
the windowsill, but to
Either way.
Huh?
Either way, the point that I think, Jack, you're on the right track, which is the way that it was presenting early, that there's a strong difference in tonality that
Yes, there
can be
is.
disruptive.
Yeah.
Right.
So either, Jack was talking about darkening the whole thing across underneath, certainly an effective, a way you could go. Doing it like this and now allows us to add our own vignette
Okay.
in the manner we wish.
Yeah.
You know what?
Initially, it was almost looking like there was something sort of falling out of the bottom of the image with that light,
Mm.
I kind of like.
Why wouldn't you crop out that whole band
Yeah,
of
you
cement on
just
the bottom?
you just
right?
cropped
There
it.
you go.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Remember
crop
when
that
you
bottom off.
Well, when I thought the kind of balance of it got lost when the bottom was cropped out.
I don't know.
Oh,
I think I like the blue and then
I
that
guess
big
because
slab
the,
across the
the
bottom and
window
take
is
it off.
more in the middle right now, but then when you take off the bottom, it's not.
Well, you don't have to take off all the bottom.
Right.
Yeah.
See, I like that better. Sorry.
Yeah,
And that brings, now that completely eliminates all of that issue down there at the bottom about tonality and everything. And now, this, you still got that little bit of stone underneath that serves as just enough of a foundation to keep the eye from going below.
I saw what you did there. And also the way the windows are pointing out, that they kind of are now pointing toward the corners of the image too.
Yep. Yep. So just that little crop, I think that crop alone, I think really strengthened the image.
Okay.
And
Thanks.
you've got, again, the tile work around, I think those are tiles.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure they're not paper, wallpaper.
Oh, no.
But,
Absolutely.
so I'm going to nitpick some technical details.
Okay.
So first of all, love the subject. Fantastic. I don't know whether you posed her that way or whether it was
She
just
posed
spontaneous.
herself.
I don't care. I think it's lovely. And again, you were on the right track with bringing her out, making her pop against that dark background that she's standing in. Great idea. A little bit of an issue with haloing. And so I'm going to guess that either the photographer used a brush and did a selection and it went beyond the subject boundaries, or there was another processing technique that was used here that introduced that haloing. And I would say that this is a case where, and I told you before, we were going to play with some luminance masking.
Okay.
So again, a technique, again, there's no one way to do these things, okay? But if I were to take a brush, and again, I'm not going to be careful about this at all. I'm just going to brush inside this dark area of the window, including the subject, and a little bit on the windowsill, because I wanted to make sure I got into those corners. Okay. Now what I can do is I can say intersect that with, you guessed it, luminance. Remember before I was always taking it to the right side and getting rid of the darks?
Right.
This time I want to go the other way. I want to select the darker areas of the image. So I'm going to pull this from the right and get and deselect the bright areas. Now you see all the bright areas dropping out.
Mm-hmm.
So right about the time that the windowsill is gone is where I want to stop. So somewhere right about in there, maybe right about there. Now what I can do is I can bring up those shadows and achieve a similar effect to what I suspect you were looking to do, which is make her pop a little bit, but still have a little bit of detail in the background. So we got a little bit of detail there. Now, if we wanted to, we could inverse that. So I could duplicate and inverse it. And then what we can do, and it's a little bit more time consuming, but we could subtract everything, all this stuff up here. We don't want that, don't want this, just get rid of all of that stuff. And, getting rid of a bunch.
Mm-hmm.
But now, again, this is just quick and dirty type stuff, okay? Just to illustrate the concept. Now we've done that. And we can say, all right, for this one, we could go the other way. Select just the brighter areas. That's going a little bit, freaky. I wasn't expecting all that stuff to be selected. But now you can make her pop a little bit. And again, if the halo wasn't there, it would look a little more natural. So these are just, you can use these luminance range options on these masks to really get into some of those areas that until this, I think it was not this latest update, but the 2 updates ago on Lightroom is where they introduced this luminance range.
Right.
Fantastic tool. Been using luminosity mask in Photoshop for years now. And now that this is in Lightroom, you almost don't need Photoshop for most of this stuff. But anyway, that is a really good technique. The illuminating, so select subject, great add-on. Combine that with or selections with luminosity or luminance range in Lightroom, and you get real fine control over those edges that we never had in Lightroom before, and helps prevent these types of halo artifacts.
That looks good. That solves what I was trying to do, but didn't know how to do.
And the only other, and I'm nitpicking here just because I got to find something. The one thing that I did notice was that the geometry isn't quite square. And what we can do here is we can use down under transform, you can click on this little grid. It's the guided transformation. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to protect this left edge because quite frankly, that is lined up with my left edge really well. So I'm going to protect that. And I'm going to add another one over here to the right because this one, it's down here at the bottom, it's further in than it is at the top.
Right.
So now I'm going to unclick this, see what it did there. And to make sure that we're still square along this bottom, I'm going to use that foundation that we were just talking about. Make sure I'm protecting that edge and the top of this window. Again, just quick and dirty. Now, I think it was Tim that was talking about that symmetry before.
Okay.
Yeah. It didn't move the image much, right? So you were close with the geometry already. So just that little touch, it just straighten the edges and keeps the viewer from going, I feel a little off balance here. Why is that?
Right. So which tool did you use?
That was what they call the guided.
Oh, right up there. Okay.
Yeah, the guided upright tool, and it's in the transform panel.
Because I used some of the ones below that with the sliders, but I couldn't get both sides.
Yep.
Okay.
And so in Lightroom, you can use this tool and you can have up to 4 of these lines. So you can, exactly. So you can use the 2 and, maybe that vertical gives you all you want. You can also use 2 horizontally and fix, horizontal balance, or you can use 3 or 4.
Fantastic. Thank you. Learned a lot.
Here we are. Looks like a statue in a garden.
Dumbarton.
Say again.
Maybe it's Dumbarton Gardens, Northwest Washington.
Okay.
They got a lot of classical Greek type statuary and mosaics, and that's what it reminds me of. Or maybe even Hillwood.
Or maybe my backyard. You
Really?
never know. No, it's not my image. I have no idea where this is.
Are those birds in there?
Well, interesting you should ask. So I'm going to zoom in here on her shoulder, and it certainly is sculpted
Yep.
into there. And if we
That's
come
a
up
bird.
here, there is
That's a bird.
another sculpted bird. I don't think that one's sculpted.
Well, I would maybe use a radial filter or something to enhance that bird.
Okay. I'll get to that in a moment. What else?
Crop in.
So when you say crop in, you're talking about take
Some of
away
the
some of the
top.
top.
Mhm.
Okay.
Maybe a little on the
So-
right.
I'm just going to change, all I'm going to do is change the aspect ratio and make it an 8:10.
Yeah, that focuses on the birds. more.
Okay. And I think maybe bringing the shadow up a little bit, so if there is some detail in there, that it would be evident.
So I'm going to build, because Jack, I think you're making a point very similar to a thought that I had. The subject is the statue and the bird. I mean, that's what I feel I should be looking at. But again, the brightness behind the statue makes that a little bit jarring. So here we can try, and this is where the select subject is going to do really well for us. And a couple of seconds later, it selects it, and the mask looks, for this quick and dirty demonstration, it's a pretty good mask.
Yeah, got a
So
little bit
I'm
of
going
bird brain
to,
there.
yeah, and got a little bit of the branch back there in the background, but again, we can clean that up if I were trying to put this in a competition. But
Yeah.
I think, Jack, you were talking about pulling up the shadows. I agree with you. If we pull the shadows up on that statue, a
Wow.
lot of good detail.
Yeah.
Yeah, makes a big difference. But now it's too similar to the background now in terms of brightness. Not to fear. We come up here, duplicate and invert that mask. Let's select all that background. I can pull that background down about half a stop or so. Now I just complete, that was the original. And that's the
Wow.
new.
Yeah, I mean, after looking at that, I'm thinking maybe a little darker on the subject, but
Yeah, and again, that was just quick and dirty. So we could come up here and take that back a little bit. We could also play with the blacks, so you can raise that shadow detail all the way, for example, but take our black point down a little bit. Adds a little bit of contrast in there.
How did you set that mask? That's magic. So
It is freaking magic, Fred. So here, I'm going to go back to the original, right? So I'm going to undo everything we just did. It's all gone, right? So now, let me do the 8:10 crop. We talked about that. Pull that in just a little bit more. All right, so there's our crop. And so paying attention, Fred, you watching?
yes, watching.
You see this selection, right? So I'm going to
Right,
click
I
on
got
that
that.
masking. And that's it. One click.
What was that
Done.
title of that? I can't read it because it's too small.
select subject.
Select
Oh,
subject.
select
is the-
subject. Okay.
Yep. Yeah, so with select subject, it's going to go through and with its Sensei magic, find the sharp edges and select all that with a mask.
All right.
And like I said, this one is not perfect. I mean, if I were looking for this to be anything close to a competition, I'd want to hit that subtract button, use a brush. I'd probably use auto mask here and deselect all this up here. This is really getting down to the finer details. But again, if you're looking for a competition worthy image, this is the kind of attention to detail that you'd want to apply. But anyway,
John?
deselect that part of it, and then you can adjust the exposure. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
John, I don't know. I'm confused on the auto mask. You sometimes use it, sometimes you don't.
Correct.
Well, I don't understand why.
Why would I
does it-
use one over the other?
Yeah.
Well, so let's talk about AutoMask, for example. Let's say, just real quick, that, well, let's put it this way. So I've got a nice little edge here, right, on the statue, but the statue has a greenish tone to it. The background is also green. So if I were to use AutoMask, because AutoMask generally goes by color tones, not by luminance or sharpness, for example, it's color. So if I do brush and I say AutoMask on this, you'll notice that it's picking up some of the masking in the statue. See this part
Yeah.
over here to the left, right here,
Yeah.
the left of, so that AutoMask is not doing me any favors there. Now,
Okay.
what I could do is I could, hold down my Alt key and, again, I could turn AutoMask back on. I could try to counter that a little bit and, maybe smooth that out. But now it's deselecting part of that background. AutoMask is not helping me here.
Mhm.
So that's where I would frequently disable it and just, usually I like a nice big feather on my brushes, but here, turn it down and get a pretty sharp edge on my selection. You can see how sharp that edge is there in the statue, right?
Mhm.
But here, if I go along the edge of that statue, I can get a much better job on that edge than AutoMask does.
Okay. Okay, I see it now.
Yeah, so this is where if I've got strong color contrast between them, like down here at the bottom, for example,
Mhm.
if I try to do, if I go back to my brush, let's do it this way. I'm going to do a new brush, and I'm going to use AutoMask on this. Down here, it's going to work wonders.
Clean. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
All right.
That helps. Thank you. Thank you for explaining that.
Thank you for that.
All right, so here we are. Thoughts?
Supreme Court?
Could be. I'm guessing it was. I mean,
based
I
on the
can't really,
door.
possibly, and I don't know. It appears that each one of these are carrying some
Oh, yeah.
form of portrait with flowers.
Mm-hmm.
So could be a protest about a case in front of the Supreme Court.
Well, the backpacks are violating the edges. Somebody should be reported to the image police. Oh, there they are, right in the middle. Yeah, and the white is pretty white.
Anybody else?
Well, I like how they have the separation between the four people. No one's, and the three are looking in directions off, and the policeman's looking straight ahead. That creates some tension.
Speaking of tension, that cop is looking rather stern.
Yeah.
Perfectly centered on the door, I might add.
Right.
Brights are a little bit too bright.
Yeah. And bring the highlights down.
All right, so let's take a look at that. So if we come up here, and I'm going to turn these highlights all the way to the left.
Mhm.
Wow, look at that detail.
Right.
So, and this is way, submitted, just bring down the highlights. But when I did that, it really brought down the brightness of that image. So to counter that, bring the white point back up. So it brings back the brightness, but keeps the detail in those columns. So that was submitted. And this is with pulling the highlights down and the whites up. So pretty much washed out. Here we got detail. And again, you can balance this, and maybe we don't want to pull the whites up quite as much, but just remember, if you pull the highlights down, it will bring the overall brightness down as well. So you need to counter that with either maybe a little bit of exposure or typically bringing up the whites.
What would happen if you put some dehaze on it?
An excellent experiment. So let's just move this to the right a little bit.
It's going to darken and sharpen.
What it's doing is definitely bringing out more detail in that marble. Don't know if you guys were paying attention, but it brought out even more detail.
All right.
Tonal contrast is what it's adding.
Hey, John.
Yes.
This is Kristen. So I'm going to own it. This is my shot. Can you see from metadata, was this shot digitally? Because this event I shot both on film and digitally. And I'm thinking this might have been one that I shot on film.
This was
No, so that
Nikon
was-
3300.
Okay, so that was digital. Interesting. Thank you guys for the feedback. I don't know why it looks so blown out.
No.
Back
I'm
to
So Kristen, what you did is what's called exposed to the right. So while the version that was submitted, and let me go back to the develop module, the version that was submitted appeared like it was washed out, like details were lost. No. As you can see, if I pull the exposure down, you can see all that wonderful detail in the marble comes right back out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, and it
so-
looks so much better with that detail.
Was it shot
Right.
raw?
And you're really not pulling.
I
the
think I
exposure down
did
that
shoot
much
it
either.
raw.
All right, so Dan, I think you were talking, or maybe Tim?
Yeah, you didn't really have to pull the exposure down that much to get that detail either.
No, not at all. I was just
Yeah.
doing that to illustrate that, for anybody who's on I don't know what the quality is, but yeah. So what you did, Kristen, is you did a really good job with protecting those highlights, but and get a little more technical. The more light you collect, the more room you have to push and pull that image, especially using a raw file. So you want to collect as much light as you can, which is going to result in a very bright image, brighter than you might really want. But if you overexpose a little bit, but not so much that you're blowing out the detail in those highlights, you can pull all of that detail back with simple pulling down the exposure in Lightroom, pulling down the highlights, and little techniques like what we were doing here. And it's a fantastic technique. I use it almost all the time. I mean, my D850 is set to overexpose by 2/3 of a stop because, quite frankly, that's where my testing, that gives me the best balance of, lifting those shadows in the original exposure. And, it turns out that frequently I've looked at some images on the back of my camera that look completely washed out and destroyed. And when I pull it into Lightroom, pull it to the left about 3/4 of a stop on the exposure, and all that detail magically comes back. So
That's awesome.
Try it.
Yeah.
Even on that D3300, the technique still applies. So just try different exposures, and you can do this in your backyard. Just take pictures of a partly clouded sky, for example. And the idea is to figure out with your particular camera how much you can overexpose the image according to what the camera is telling you the exposure should be. And it really helps if you use spot metering for this technique, by the way. So if you set your camera for spot metering and you put your focus or your focus point on like the brightest part of a cloud, for example, and expose for that, and keep moving that exposure, overexposing it until you start losing detail. And the way you can do it is you could do it in 1/3 stops. You could start off with 1 stop deltas between these images until you find out at what quote overexposure range you start losing that detail, and then pull it back a little bit.
Okay.
That will give you the option, and you need to shoot raw in order for this technique to really play itself out. Because if you're shooting JPEGs, you risk destroying your JPEGs. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so if you shoot raw, this technique works wonders. Or
That's
protecting it, you lose all the, you don't get as nearly as much noise in the shadows in the final image because you're not lifting those shadows trying to pull up detail. You're actually dropping the exposure to recover those highlights. But again, you're not overexposing so much that you're losing any of that detail in the highlights.
Yeah.
You just said what
yeah.
I was gonna say, John.
Say again?
You just said what I was gonna say. By overexposing a little bit, you save the shadows and you reduce the noise generated.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So the technique, Kristen, that you did here, whether you knew you were doing a good thing or not, worked out great.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, because you'll notice as well. I mean, just by dropping, some of the exposure, here a little bit, just a little bit. So go back to the original, and you'll notice, by moving those sliders just a little bit, look at the people. Look at the markers here. So that was the way it was submitted. This is after the edits.
Yeah, they just look so much richer.
Exactly. Much richer skin tones, much more, a little bit more saturation in the red jacket, for example. So this is what you can do with raw images.
Yeah, yeah, that's great.
I'm going to
Thank you
say
so
that
much
if
for
I
this.
were to shoot this with my spot focus on the blue character in the middle, I would have blown out the highlights.
Mhm.
True. So that's
Yeah.
why that's why you want to get the exposure reading from the brightest part of the scene.
Mhm.
And then, so you get your exposure there, and then you can focus on your other subject. And
That
this is
wasn't
why
an easy subject with bright light on a white building.
exactly. Yeah, definitely. Especially with the police officer or security guard back here in the back with a white shirt, right?
Yeah, right. I like
Okay.
the street photo of that, the scene.
Yeah, the street photography feel to
Yeah.
it. Yeah. All right, let's move on. I think this is a common martin, but I'm not a bird expert by any stretch.
Might be a tree swallow.
Hmm.
Thoughts?
Can you zoom in on that bird a little bit more?
I absolutely can.
Pretty. Oh, beautiful. Maybe some cropping to show more of the bird and less of the background? Or, yeah.
So guide me on the cropping that you have in mind.
Well, at first I thought, you got a vertical post, so do it vertically, but then you've got those two little houses coming out from the side, so it is kind of a horizontal type too, so.
Well,
Yeah,
I
what
mean,
that
you could
brings up
still do a
the,
vertical crop.
Yeah,
Yeah, that
that looks
yeah, I
good.
mean, what is the subject? And,
Right.
is it the bird? Is it the bird houses? And I think you could crop, if you decided, well, the bird is really the subject I want the most, you can crop it and include enough birdhouse to convey the birdhouse shape and stuff. And then I would also, do a burn around the eye to kind of bring that out, because that's
Oh,
on
yeah.
the dark side right now. Well, I mean, actually go in and
Like a radial
modify
filter.
that one area around the eye. That's what I would, but
Yeah,
that's,
you're talking about in here.
yes, exactly. Yes.
Yeah,
I would
we could. I'll
define
try that.
Yeah, I'm a Photoshop user, so I don't know how you would do it in Lightroom, but Yeah, to define an area and lighten that accordingly so that the eye is now visible. And
Yeah,
kind of
and
highlight.
here, I suspect that this is not going to work well with the JPEG, but yeah, it pulled it out a little bit.
That's a lot better. I mean, it's getting there, you know.
Yep. So there you get to see a little bit more detail. You get to catch light in the eye.
Yeah.
Another thing that, this is another, well, before I do anything else, somebody else has some ideas, I'm sure.
I love the shallow depth of field so that the background is,
Good separation with the background.
yeah.
And I like the way with the cropping, the way the bottom right corner kind of,
Leads.
you know, draws you in or lets you out, depending which way you're going. But
Anybody else?
I think I might lighten it a little bit more. I don't know. Or just the shadows part.
Yeah, we'll play that in just a moment, Jack.
Okay.
Anybody else?
Once you select the subject, if you can select just the bird and darken the
background,
the whole picture and just lighten the bird up a little bit.
So here, you'll notice if I do select subject, it's going to get more than just the bird, right?
Yeah,
But in this case, might be a good thing. Might be a good thing. So I'm going to leave this selected, and I'm going to duplicate and invert the mask. Because this is a really good mask. This type of subject worked really well for this technology.
oh, nice, yeah.
So now we can pull that background down just a little bit. Just a little bit, not too much. And we can come back up here to the front and we can pull this one up just a little bit, get a little bit better separation. And now, if I really wanted to, what we could do, I could do linear gradient. I'm gonna pull it from the bottom. And I'm gonna pull that exposure down just a little bit, just a little bit. Right, but now, yeah, that background is darker than I want it to be. What can I do with that? Intersect with select subject. So now this linear gradient is intersected with the subject. So what happens if I pull this exposure down on the gradient? Notice it's affecting only the post. So we can darken the post just a little bit so it's not overpowering the bird, makes the bird pop a little bit. And we got even a little bit more separation with the background. And again, I'm showing you some techniques, not necessarily that this is perfect for this image, but just ways to help bring your subjects out a little bit more in images. Any other feedback on this image?
Can you take and go down into your color scale and add some luminance to your blue?
The HSL.
You add some luminance to this and see what happens there. Yeah, it makes her, I'm going to call it her. Her feathers do pop a little bit. Now, obviously, I could take this way too far, but right about there seems to do a good job of bringing out her colors.
Now go down to calibration.
Oh, is that what you meant?
No, now go down to calibration.
Okay, and bring the blue up there.
Yeah, slide the blue saturation.
Yeah, now we're talking, buddy. Do you see the difference, everybody?
Yeah.
This is the way it was before, and this is after those adjustments.
What is that doing in calibration?
Ooh, I encourage you to experiment. So calibration is down here. You got the red, green, and blue primaries. These are the three colors that your sensor uses to capture the world, right? And you can change the hue So you can pick one of these channels and say for, like we were just doing with the blue, we could change the hue of that blue and completely change, the tonality of that image, for example. But what we did is we just took up saturation. You could also go the other way and desaturate the blues.
Mhm.
But as you could tell, it's a global adjustment. So this is not, this applies to your entire image, but you can get a lot more fine grain control over adjusting a specific color channel or combination with these. So you can use, all the colors in our image are made up of these 3 primary colors. So you can move these sliders around to get a global adjustment to give you a feel that you want. I mean, for example, you might pull up the reds and yellows and greens and adjust for a, like a autumnal scene, like fall color scene. You can use these, the calibration down here to give you a nice global adjustment, and then touch it up later with, fine-tuned control with brushes, for example.
Okay,
But yeah,
so the
definitely
difference
experiment with this.
between- I'm sorry, the difference then between HSL and calibration is one is global and one is not.
Well, the HSL is global as well. But the calibration, in my experience, is, I guess it's the difference of fine-tune control over coarse grain control.
Okay.
And the calibration, in my opinion, gives me a little bit more fine-tuned control over, again, color balance in the image.
Okay. And so the tone curve, is that one local?
No, tone curve as well is a global adjustment. So for example, I've got a, like a light contrast. And again, this applies to the entire image.
But you're selecting.
But
yeah,
I think this is where you were going, back to linear. I could pick just the blues and apply that contrast to just the blue channel.
Yeah. Okay.
But again, it is another global adjustment, and that's certainly, a tone curve you can apply for that as well.
So color grading, is that a local?
Color grading is global.
No,
yeah. So here you can definitely do midtones, darks, mids, lights, midtones, and darks, I should say. And, of course, you can do globals as well.
Okay.
Typically, I would use color grading for, putting different color tones in the shadows versus the highlights.
Okay.
But yeah, if you haven't played with calibration, pick a colorful image and just start moving these sliders around, see what the effects are.
Okay.
And you'll figure out how you can apply it in your creativity. All right, now let's pick up the pace a little bit here. Got a bee and a flower. What? A very colorful image.
It's very vibrant.
What if you tone down the saturation just a little bit?
Well, I'm going to start off with something before we start nitpicking. Great capture. You define an insect that's going to hold position even at a fast shutter speed long enough to get an image like this. Well done. Great find. So you were talking about pulling down the saturation a little bit. But this, again, just pulling it down just a little bit. Oops, I won't do that. Go back to color. Go back to color. That's like a -15 saturation, I think.
Maybe lighten the black just a little.
Instead of the saturation, you mean?
No. I'm just saying separate from color under either shadows or black to lighten that a little to bring out a little more of the
Texture.
yeah, see, there's stuff going on in there. And that's maybe more than but you can see that there's a little bit, yeah, so that there's a little bit of detail that's, I guess that's reflecting off of the flower on its abdomen, huh?
Appears to be.
That's kind of cool, actually. Yeah, that's sort of a surprising effect, but
But at least you get to see the segmented parts of his abdomen.
I've restored some of the yellow saturation.
Pull the saturation up just a little bit. Yeah, it takes a lot of saturation on the yellow to move it, but something like that, Fred?
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and it's a nice complement to the kind of magenta of the flower.
Again, looking at reflections in the eyeball stuff.
Mhm.
That is nice that way.
Really adds detail to the picture.
Yeah, I think the photographer did a good job of positioning the bee off center. If I do an overlay of a crop, I tend to use the Fibonacci sequence. So this is not a rule of thirds crop, but it's rather a Fibonacci. So it's a 1.6 to 1 to 1.6. And that's right on the power button, power position, if you will.
I like the detail, especially in the wings.
Good detail. Here's where a nit starts to come in. Look at all this wonderful detail in this flower. So the focal plane is slightly in front of my main subject. But a bee is actually slightly soft.
Mm-hmm.
Nice sharp detail on the leg here. And then the body goes out a little bit. But again, this is another one of those, you captured a moment. Captured a moment. The moment's more important than the technical execution here.
What was the f-stop?
It appears to be 5.6.
Yeah, there you go, 5.6, yeah.
But again,
F8 probably would have gotten that.
Possibly. And this is one of those things. I've tried to capture these, and so I know the challenge here. I know the challenge here. Between there could have been a slight breeze moving this flower back and forth
Yeah,
and side to
yeah.
side.
You're right.
It's hard unless you're on a tripod. Your body's moving, even your breathing. Can move that camera in at these close focal ranges. Even if this is 55 millimeters, to get this bee even close to this large in the frame, and even if this is a crop, you still got to have the pixels to be able to crop this much in. So the point that I'm driving at is it's a very close focal range, focal distance. I might even be able to find a focal distance if I wanted to, but the point is, it doesn't take much movement of either the subject or the camera to move that focal plane, just enough where the depth of field is now outside the range of acceptable sharpness. And that's just one of the challenges, perhaps one of the interesting aspects of macro photography is that kind of a challenge.
I don't think I'd want to get that close to a bee.
These guys don't bother you. I mean, really, these guys won't bother you at all.
Yeah,
Those
if you're not a
hornets you gotta
flower,
watch
you
for.
don't have anything they want.
I don't know.
Well, Patty, we're not saying, Patty, you're a flower. Okay.
Yeah, I didn't mean it that way.
Okay. I'm just saying, I don't know. Maybe it's the deodorant I use. It seems like I attract wasp and yellow jackets. So
Yeah.
Well, try holding off on using Axe then.
So the only other knit that I would pick on this one is, I don't know if this was an artifact left over from a cloning job or anything, but that one little bright pixel there,
Oh, that little piece of pollen, you mean?
gone. Okay. Move on. But back in the late 17th century, this actually was a wall.
Yep, that's right. To keep out the people that used to live there. Yep.
What do we think? Some feedback for the photographer.
Well, it does a good job of telling where he's at, and you know, just looks like New York City. It gives you that feel.
I like the black and white. I think that's cool.
Mhm.
This is, yeah, I can't remember who thought of it earlier. This is all about the shapes and textures, right? So I think black and white probably works better than color in this case.
I like the
Yeah,
windows too.
Mm-hmm.
The shapes and textures definitely, and also the words and the, you know, this is sort of iconic. I mean, Broadway and Wall Street and the Stock Exchange and the Statue of Liberty. It's hard to get much more iconic than that for, you know, American symbols.
Well, I kind of like the time stamp of it. I mean, it could have been taken anywhere in the last anytime in the last 100 years. That same picture.
Yep. Although if we zoom in up here, it looks like, and I have not been to this intersection to see these signs, but it looks like the city actually included a small photo on the street sign.
Yeah. Does look that way.
As somebody said earlier, it's so iconic, you know, that kind of picture.
I have a
Any other-
question. I have a question. What's the Canyon of Heroes? It's underneath where it says Broadway, Canyon of Heroes.
Oh, I
When
am
they
not
when they have the marches, like after World War II and stuff, that's where they march down the street and have the parade.
Oh, with the ticker tape parades.
There you go. It's the
Yeah.
Constitution Avenue of Manhattan.
Okay.
Any ideas on how we might improve it?
What, Wall Street and Broadway? Yeah, I sure do.
The image. The image.
Well, you know, you might use can't think of the name of it right now, but kind of the image straightening part may help, may change it a little bit.
I don't think you have enough image to do that.
You could certainly, you know, you talk about like straightening up some of these architectural lines.
Yeah, you know, when you what do you call it? Down lower the transform.
Yeah, we could try that. If we do that, I think it will actually be worse than just a simple rotate. But let's take a look. So let's go to transform, try to guided. So if I do here, that one, and try this one, just see how it looks. I think that,
Yeah, it cuts off.
I think that's worse.
Yeah.
I agree.
Now I'll say that from my point of view, I kind of like the angles here. I think it works.
Yeah. I mean, the main one, the
The
pole
pole
of the street light.
That's vertical.
Yeah, exactly.
And, you know, in this, you know, obviously you're going to be looking up at the street sign. So I'm not worried about those angles on the building as much. I think those work fine. The one thing that I would do up front, this down here at the bottom and this corner,
Mhm.
you know, they bother me a little bit. So I would go back to the original rotation and pull that bottom up just enough to get rid of those. And now I want to, you know, the window over here on the right, I want to pull it up to just barely the top of that so I don't introduce another annoying artifact. So we keep all the directions, you keep the place, if you will, the sense of place without introducing distractions.
Is it just my eyes? They're kind of bugging out, but it looks like there's a circle kind of in the middle where the building is darker, and I'm not sure how, but it's bright again down at the bottom and bright at the top.
All right, so you're talking about in here in the middle, it looks like there's it's like a reverse vignette almost.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit. So that it may be, so what we could try is, let's zoom out a little bit.
Yeah, you can
I
see.
think that's when I
of this.
noticed it, when it was like a thumbnail.
Yeah, so let's do that and let's do that. Oh, too much. All right, so just kicks and grins. Let's pull that exposure down a little bit, see if we can balance that out. All right, that seems to balance it out a bit.
Yeah, except the lower, yeah, both the lower corners seem light now.
Yeah, so I think we can fix that. Again, this is just quick and dirty type stuff here. But we can, again, adjust that exposure, pull that down, see if we balance it out. All right, that does a fair job of balancing out. And now we can say done on that, and we can bring up the overall exposure maybe, see how that looks. That maybe a little bit that, and we try the whites maybe. Oh, now we can start to add some contrast. Speaking of contrast, let's see what happens if we take the black down just a little bit. Oh, now of course we're operating a thumbnail, right?
Yeah.
Let's make it a little bit larger. What do you think? So that was the original. This is after those adjustments.
Yeah.
I like it better. I think it makes the sign pop more.
It absolutely does. Absolutely does. Again, and what we just did is we separated the subject, which is the street sign and the post, from the background. And that's, you want to make sure that there's no ambiguity on what the viewer is supposed to look at and pay attention to. And by doing those adjustments, it made that dark signpost, street sign, pop.
Yeah.
All right.
Cool sign.
Take a look here.
Oh, yeah, that sky replacement button. I remember that.
I'll tell you what, let's zoom in. So I'm going to click in on the 100%. Let's see what 100% does for us. Did we go in the right direction? Yes, we did. So the photographer submitted this one, and you can see it's barely 400 pixels on the edge. Now, I bring this up because this has actually been a comment made by multiple judges in our competitions.
Yep.
So when you're uploading to our SmugMug host, there is no upper limit on the dimensions. And the larger your source image, the better it will appear on screen. And in this case, with an image of only 400 pixels on the edge, it's going to be hard for us to do any kind of push pull on this. So just be aware of that. Again, I'm not telling you you have to use a bigger image. So submit a small one if you wish. Just realize that when we're looking at it full screen now, it's pixelated.
Thousands look better than hundreds.
Correct.
Always money too.
But let's talk about some good stuff here. Great color. The timing of the setting sun, I'm assuming it's the setting sun here. The setting sun just nestled up against that, the ridge in the background. Just the placidity of the lake. A great timing. nice idea, great color in the sky.
Yeah, it has a kind of almost retro look to it, like 60s or something.
Yeah. That's a lot of fog in there, isn't there?
Could be, or it could be haze,
Haze.
or you know, again, if this is Glacier, you know, looking at the file name,
Yeah.
it was Glacier National Park.
Oh,
It could be smoke.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's
Yep.
true, which could also be causing some of that orange sky.
Oh,
Yep,
yes, it would.
absolutely.
Most definitely.
Interesting.
That's the orange lining of fire season
Right.
in the West.
I'm just curious what a little bit of dehaze would do.
Let's take a look. Definitely saturates the sky, brings out a little detail in the ridge. Of course,
Mhm.
you can take it too far, but
Right.
you know, with a raw file instead of this JPEG with that low resolution,
Mhm.
that could make a big bit of a difference. And you know, the photographer could play with that a little bit and get a nice balance of, I guess, you know, mist intermingling with the trees in the
Mhm.
background.
Mhm.
And the other thing that I notice here is the water line appears to be off balance. Now, I don't know if the camera was perfectly level and it's just the nature of the far angle, but straightening out that shoreline
Mhm.
makes it feel straighter to me.
Mhm.
Water's kind of picky about that. I mean, it's curved, you know, if you really
Can
can
be.
see it, but it sure looks straight to the eyeball.
Any other feedback?
I'd love to be there.
Okay. Let's move on. Body Island Light.
Mhm.
I love how he got the reflection
Mhm.
in there. That's cool.
Definitely. Definitely.
I'm wondering if the photographer cropped it, and if so, could they maybe have left a little more space at the top?
Yep, because the lightning rod hits the edge of the image up
Yeah.
there.
Maybe a tad more saturation to,
So let's play with that. So if we add a little saturation, global saturation, right? So you see a little bit coming in this part of the grass.
end up in the corner of the sky. Start to get a
Yeah,
little blue.
you do, definitely. But you also start picking up a lot more blue in the lighthouse. Now, the challenge here, I'm gonna call it a challenge because I've photographed this lighthouse multiple times.
Mhm.
So I know exactly where the camera was, and I know pretty much the sun had just gone below the western horizon here,
Mhm.
or was just about to. You know, so the right side is west, if you haven't figured that out, and the left side is east. This camera position, this composition, I think would work much better at sunrise.
Mm.
And the way, and I'm going to come back to the saturation because I don't think I'm done with that. But so what about this, Jack? Let me just pull up a linear gradient on the bottom, and I'm just going to pull up. I'm going to pull up the color temperature a little bit. Look how just that little bit is making that grass pop.
Mm-hmm.
So that brings in a little bit of that saturation. And we could do, select sky, for example. We could do another mask and add a select sky. And think about it for a little bit. There we go. And we could try bringing the blues out a little bit here. I don't know if I want to do that, but that could work. We could try pulling the exposure down just a touch. And again, I'm working on a JPEG, so you're going to see banding up here much sooner than you would with a raw file. And you can certainly add some dehaze and saturation to the sky. But again, the challenge here is with the setting sun and woo, psychedelic, or really bad watercolor. But anyway, you see the point here is that we could pull this up a little bit, get a little more contrast and a little bit blue tones in the sky. But pulling it too far, because again, the way the lighting was, this corner is going to turn much darker, much faster, and it's just not going to look balanced. It'd be a lot better if there were a nice big cumulus cloud right there in that corner, but
Sure. Yep.
yeah, if wishes were only food. But anyway, this is, some of the things that we can do to play with this particular image the way it is. And again, we can go back to our foreground mask. I pulled up the white balance a little bit to the yellow. You can certainly add some contrast and maybe a little bit of dehaze and tonal contrast in there and bring up some saturation as well. But these are things that you can do to help bring more interest. It looks like this was taken very late in the summer or maybe even in the fall after, the grasses have pretty much died down, because early summer, these are rather green. Yeah. So let me talk about sunrise. And again, I've been here for sunset, been here for sunrise, been here for midnight Milky Way shots. So it's what I will demonstrate. I'm going to attempt to demonstrate very quick and dirty. The challenge here at sunset is I'm going to come in here and get out of mask mode, zoom in here. What you're going to see is that this little bit of rim light on the right edge of the lighthouse. Because of the angle of where you are on this boardwalk, and trust me, you're not going to want to get off of this boardwalk because you're going to be up into your armpits in mud as soon as you step off. Okay. But where this boardwalk is, you're just not going to get setting sun side light over the middle of this lighthouse. It just isn't going to work. But if you're there for sunrise, you can get a lighting effect on the left side of it. So what I'm going to try, little brush here. Here, I'm going to use Automask. Who was that asking me about that? And when would I choose it? Because here I've got nice, good contrast between the subject and the sky. So I'm going to just come down here real quick, just along this left edge. And I'm going to give it a little bit of a color shift to the right. Pull that up, and then just a little bit more exposure. With morning light, you see how it's giving more depth, more contour to the lighthouse.
Yep. Not so flat.
Exactly. With the morning light, that's the lighting effect you would get at this location. Now, it could be that the photographer just didn't have the opportunity to be there at morning. Trust me, I get it. Sometimes you just got to go with the moment and capture the moment. Again, the moment's more important than the technical details of an image. But I'm nitpicking on this image a little bit, only because it would have been more powerful at sunrise, I think, my opinion. But anyway, just giving you an idea of what the lighting would be at sunrise. But again, another thing that I was going to illustrate with this one, I love this reflection.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
The positioning on this was not accidental. The photographer put that there intentionally, and I love it. So if I try to do some fixing of this, and clean this up in Lightroom, it's going to be an exercise in frustration. Let me demonstrate. So I'm going to zoom in here. I'm going to make it 200%, get in nice and tight. And I'm going to try to fix this. Yeah, man, it's just, even if I go to heal, I'm just not going to find a good spot, because Lightroom for spot removal has to copy the source material from somewhere else in the image. So it's not just going to make it up like Photoshop can. So not even going to try. Right click, edit in, open as smart object in Photoshop. I always use open as smart object to start my edits. Preserves all the Lightroom changes so you can go back and adjust them here. Now I can add a layer. I'm going to call this cleanup. I'm going to zoom in on this section here. I'm going to pull out my trusty Wacom pen. I'm going to select my spot healing. Make sure I'm on sample all layers at the top. And now I'm just going to start painting over this grass. Wow, look at that magic. Clean that up just a little bit. There we go, do that. All right, so maybe I'll leave that one in. So just that little bit, if I zoom back out to fill the screen, I turn that off. Just that little bit made a big difference, in my opinion. And you could even, the other thing that I notice is you might think that this is a blade of grass. It is not. This is floating on top of the water. So just a little touch up there. Yes, the lightning rod is a little bit off. We could fix that if we were putting this in competition, but just to come back out, fill this up. Look at that. Turn the layer off and back on.
What size Wacom tablet do you use?
I use the medium.
Okay.
I think it's the medium. Hang on a second. Small. That's the small.
Small.
Mm-hmm.
Can you recommend a good tutorial or something? Because I have a Wacom tablet and I've yet to really start using it because I feel overwhelmed.
I tell you what, I think you can look at Learn, Learn.
Oh yeah.
So Aaron Nace is the guy's name. He does a really good job. I think he may have a few tutorials on Wacom. I know that a gentleman by the name of Nick Page has done some. He's done some tutorials on using the Wacom, and actually, I think it's Brian Matias has done. Brian Matias is a photographer, really good photographer. He's got his own YouTube channel and social media and all that kind of stuff. He used to work for Wacom.
Oh wow!
And I know he's done some tutorials himself. So if you look for those three names, I think you'll find some good tutorials. But anyway, Matias, Matiash.
Okay, great, thank you.
So anyway, I just wanted to show. Sometimes it doesn't take a lot to make a very meaningful impact to an image, like that little bit of cleanup there. I think that really brings out that reflection and really add some power to the image. Again, the photographer did a great job with this scene. I like the positioning of this. Nothing the photographer can do about a boring sky, so I'm not going to add any demerits there. But I think this is a nice image.
Ask you something. You keep mentioning working in JPEG is a mess. I never do, but we required to turn our photos in JPEGs, or could I bring in a TIFF?
No, I got to go back and
editing,
check.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to go back and look because JPEG. I'm sorry, SmugMug for these galleries for the plan that we're using, because we're just a poor photo club, so we can't afford the really big plan. It does not accept raw files with the plan that we have.
Well, I was bring in a TIFF. That's not a raw file.
You're correct. It's not raw, but I'm not sure if it accepts TIFFs. You could try uploading a TIFF on the next competition, which, oh, by the way, is in 2 weeks. Competition theme is heat, by the way. But you could try uploading a TIFF. I don't recall trying to upload a TIFF, but just try dragging in, and if it takes it, fantastic.
Yeah, and if you do all of your, edits on a raw file, and then save it as a JPEG, most of the benefits of raw are incorporated into that image, right?
Correct. I think where Fred's going is that the TIFF is going to preserve even greater detail because you got more bit depth.
Yes, it does twice. But I also noticed that TIFFs look a little different on my display than JPEGs do.
Things tend to exaggerate saturation.
Yeah, I mean, I use TIFFs for printing rather than.
Yeah, if the print shop takes a TIFF. Some of them actually, I've worked with some print shops that don't, believe it or not.
Wow.
I know, that's what I said. But anyway, all right, let's talk about this image here.
I love that. Is it on
And
a
by love that,
motorcycle?
well, I don't think so, because we see stenciling lettering on the back. So I'm
But
going to guess
wondering
this
if
is a
it's one
fender
of,
well.
oh, one of those old World War II kind of.
Yes, a military
Um,
vehicle,
Yeah,
a 5-ton truck. I don't know,
Wow, okay.
but that bulb looks pretty good shape.
yep.
A,
And
rest-
I
a restoration,
maybe.
maybe went out to the tank farm in Bristow.
Yeah.
They had-
The
Yeah,
I
winery
mean,
down south that has some of these vehicles,
Where is
Um,
that?
somewhere southwest of here, closer to Charlotte.
Okay.
Charlotte,
It is from the
Um,
tank farm, if anyone actually wanted to know.
yeah, and I was thinking this might be the front right fender of a half track, but it's hard to tell for me.
Well, yeah, but look at the very back of the photograph. Would you really have that light spot there if it was a half track? Wouldn't that be all filled in?
Well, I don't think so, because it looks like the photographer is lined up almost parallel with the axis of the tire. So this
Oh.
bright spot back here, I think, is just background ground, actually.
No, I mean, right by the cage around the headlight at about 11 o'clock.
Yeah, you're
Right
talking
here,
about this
yeah,
part here.
that the light part, very small light part. But if they're lined up, that may not even be the vehicle at all.
All right. All right. Any other feedback for this photographer?
I just love the black and white treatment.
I think that was a great choice.
Period pieces, yeah.
I think that was a great choice.
Mhm.
Definitely gives you that 1940s feel.
Definitely.
Somebody was walking on that fender
Yeah, it looks like it.
wearing.
Definitely
vibrant
looks like a
soles.
footprint. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Somebody left their soul on that fender.
looks like they were probably working on the hood, on the engine.
Could
That's where
Possibly.
the foot goes.
Right.
So let's do an experiment. Because you know me and experiments.
Mm.
I'm going to take my brush. I'm going to turn that feather way down. I'll make the brush about the same size as that headlight, because the photographer did such a good job getting directly in front of it that I can just click. Now, don't want to bring up the exposure, because if I bring up the exposure, it's going to bring up, all the dark parts too. So leave the exposure where it's at. Put that back. But if I bring up my highlights,
Oh, yeah.
now if I just add a touch of white on top of that, suddenly somebody turned the power on. What do you think?
It's cool. Yeah.
Great trick.
I like that.
Yeah, and I was looking, I think the photographer did a good job of managing the bright background, this ground back here. I think it would have been easy for that brightness back there to conflict with the subject. So whether the photographer intentionally darkened that in post-processing or somehow otherwise managed it in the exposure, either way, good job on that. The backlighting here with this and getting in tight on this type of detail. I think somebody else said this. I love it. And I can't remember who said this, focusing in on just a little detail on this vehicle. We know we're looking at a period piece here. We don't need the full thing to get that. And this detail, it just leaves a little bit of mystery. to the overall scene that I think works well in this case.
You know,
Tonality, go ahead.
now I'm thinking along the lines of your experimentation there.
Okay.
If you made like light beams, of course, then you're getting into the artistic.
Exactly.
And then
But
Photoshop, but
yeah, and that's where if the camera were off axis a little bit,
yes,
that would have a stronger effect. For me to do
Right.
the light beams here, of course, it would just be coming right at camera.
exactly. That's very true.
But I think tonality on this is handled very well.
Mhm.
You know, the protected the highlights on the fender. It would be so easy to blow those out. I think, you know, so again, I'm trying to nitpick on this. And the only thing that I could think of, you know, and again, I was just doing some experimentation. That wasn't something that I think it was
I
actually needed,
know.
but maybe adding just a touch more contrast, maybe.
It's a great photo.
Maybe, you know, again, I'm experimenting here. So I think it's good. Anything else from anybody?
Would you, if you were going to submit this to a competition, would you get rid of those footprints?
No,
No? Okay.
I don't think it detracts. Yeah, it's a little muddy. I mean, you know, but if you got rid of this footprint over here, you'd have to get rid of the mud up here in the front as
Okay.
well. And I don't know.
It adds
All
to
right.
it. Yeah.
It's
So
part of
listen,
the
I mean-
kind of ambiance of it, you know, I mean, it's
Yeah.
a military vehicle, the utility of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm walking on it, I'm fixing it. You know?
Right.
You know, these things, these were used, right? So a little dirt, I think, adds bit character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just don't know about the competitions. I've heard judges before pick at things like that I just go, really?
You know what? And that's okay. All right, let them, right?
Yeah.
So the thing that we have to keep in mind, and many of our judges remind us of this, it is the opinion of
Mhm.
that particular judge
Right.
at that particular moment in time.
Right.
Give them a glass of wine, they may come back and have a different opinion.
I love
All
it.
right, let's move
So
on.
you're suggesting giving wine to the judges then?
Well, I will acknowledge that when we were meeting in person back before
Yeah.
recent times,
Right,
we always treated the judge to dinner before the competition.
Ooh.
right.
So they had their choice of beverage if they so chose. So we go from a nice black and white period piece to a colorful set of colored pencils.
And how perfectly sharpened they are.
I think that's what the photographer was trying to highlight. And look at the symmetry and precision with which I sharpened my pencils.
Mhm.
Well, and the display of colors as well,
Mhm.
you know, is pretty nice.
Any other thoughts?
The detail in the parts that are in focus, and then a lot of it is out of focus,
Uh-huh.
or, you know, fuzzy ambiance, whatever.
Mhm.
So definitely a macro feel to this.
Right.
Yeah, and I think it works well. I think it does. I mean,
Mhm.
obviously your eye is drawn to areas of highest contrast, brightness, sharpness can be more contrast, but definitely, you know, right here on this light blue pencil seems to be the focal, you know, where the focal point was for the image.
And that's my favorite color.
So you love this image, don't you?
Yes.
So I'm gonna throw a net out there. First of all, love the colors, love the saturation, love this type of photography. I'm you know, I'm not a huge macro photographer, but I definitely enjoy it, you know, that as a genre. The plastic bin is just keeping me from looking at all those wonderful pencils.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, we're talking about, you know, this part down here in the bottom right and a little bit on the left, but it's that one doesn't bother too much because it's all out of focus. I'm wondering if the same composition were there without this front part of this plastic bin, would it be strengthened if we had seen that row? There was obviously at least one row of pencils beneath it.
Mhm.
Would I have enjoyed that more than what I'm seeing here?
I don't
I don't
think
know.
so.
I
I think by virtue of those tips being obscured, that the eye goes to the blue and
That's true.
you know, whatever you want to call that one above it.
That's possible. You know,
Mhm.
so I don't know what that particular color really is. I'm going to call it the light blue. But again, if that were the focal point for the camera, for the image, then that bottom row of pencils would have been just about, you know, I expect it probably would have been about this depth of field, you know, this light tan beige color here. But anyway, again, I'm looking at ways that I was asking myself, how might this have been a stronger image? Maybe being able to see the rest of those pencils would have strengthened it. But again, I'm looking for a nit here. Love the color, love the composition. The focus is on point. And there is a bit of a vignette that I think has been added here, which I think strengthens the image. So I mean, I don't know. That's me, but I'm not actually judging this. I'm just trying to look for ways that I might improve it. Anybody else? Any ideas?
Distracted by that, looks like a pencil sharpener, the white part.
Or tape, yeah, that's the part that drew my eye away. But then again, if you look at it from a different point, it's like, okay, here is a set of tools, with that being a tool as well. But
Yeah.
ooh,
Oh yeah. See, so you didn't know just how
yeah.
sharp that was, did you?
But
See
zeroed
this.
in,
Oh,
like
by the
cropped in
way,
like that is cool.
well, yeah. Look at that. I think you're onto something.
Yeah.
But again, this is what happens when you submit an image that's like 5,000 pixels to a side.
Mhm.
You can really let the judge get in close and see that wonderful detail in your macro shot. But I was trying to see whether I thought this was like a sharpener. I suspect it's more like a, I don't know. I just know what's
Could
in.
be the, well, I was going to say, could be the top of a pencil sharpener, but
Could be.
you can see,
I'm
it
thinking
almost looks like you can see through it though.
Mhm.
Yeah, exactly. Which is why I don't think it's a pencil sharpener. But you know, I could go into my wife's craft room right over there and find a drawer full of this stuff. So again, great idea. I think it was well executed.
I actually liked it really close up.
I did too. That cropping was really,
That was
made it
very
really
strong.
great.
So let's give that a shot here. Oh, don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. No, stop it. Sometimes you hit the wrong buttons by accident. All right, so let's go to cropping. Let's lock the aspect ratio. Let's get in really tight.
Mhm. Yeah. I like that.
I mean, if you're gonna go macro, go all in, right?
Mhm, right.
Yeah,
No,
I like that crop.
Mm-hmm.
Got the
Yeah, that-
rounded textures and the sharp textures and the grainy and the smooth.
and again, because of the tight, you know, very close focal distance, you know, you get rapid fall off in the focus, you know, the depth of field.
But
So,
you're seeing real detail in those close-up ones.
oh yeah.
Lots of texture.
So it sounds like we zeroed in on the real improvement here would be just a tighter crop.
It's a different
Well done.
image. They're both
Well
good.
done. All right, moving right along. Stained glass, and we are holy cow, is it really 10 o'clock? Oh my goodness, guys, we have gone way over. So let's see if we can give at least some feedback on these.
Beautiful colors and textures. It's just the cropping that's taken my eye away, on the right and left.
I'm going to point something else out to you here in just a moment. Keep that thought. Anything else?
Well, I see a pink edge on the bottom.
Yeah.
You mean
Yeah,
like
Yeah, it
down
looks
here?
like light.
No,
you know,
no, further in.
On the bottom, by
Right
the
on the
yellow.
black.
Ah,
the
the
yellow.
fringing, the fringing. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. And you get a little bit of up here as well, but
Mhm.
okay. But it's stained glass. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, that's probably
sometimes
light
these artifacts
leakage, isn't
happen.
it?
It might
Yeah.
be what it really is.
Yeah.
All right. Any other feedback? Did anybody else notice that it's a mirrored image?
Oh, wow, no.
Well,
So that
okay,
little,
yeah, I didn't
that
look
little
at that
spot
kind of
right
right
there,
Oh,
and that spot
yeah.
right
There
Right,
it
there.
the things
is.
I always make sure I get rid of at least one of if I'm, doing a lot
Right.
of cloning and stuff.
I don't know that it matters here. Because again, whether the artist did this to fix something in the composition or whether they had this idea all along about I
Mm.
can do a little bit of a kaleidoscope type image with this stained glass. I don't think I care. Because again, it goes back to the symmetry. You got that perfect vertical line in here,
Mhm.
which is where the photographer split this and mirrored it onto the other side. I
Yeah.
would say that I was curious. I'm just curious. If I'm going to go that far, would it look interesting, just with, do a quarter of this image and then flip it vertically and then flip the whole image horizontally? So there's only a quarter of the image that's actually quote real. Everything else is copied.
Mm.
Maybe,
Then
but
you
then
won't
if
have
you won't have the
Blue
yellow
and
down here.
yellow.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Exactly. So, but what got me actually looking at that in particular was that it seemed like this midpoint here in the middle is out of line with where the rosette, probably not the right word, but the corner over here to the
Huh.
left and right. So that's where I realized, wait a minute.
Mm.
Yeah, well, and when you
This is
start
flipped.
looking at it, then you see the pattern of light
Mhm. It's
radiating
exactly
from the
same.
center at 9 o'clock and 3 o'clock. Hey, isn't
You know
that
what?
identical?
Mhm.
But again, you know what? I think it works. Again, this is
Mhm.
another one of those creative aspects that I think really plays well. I'm wondering as well, this radiant back here in the background,
Mhm.
was it added in post? Because this edge right here along this curve of
Mhm.
the circle is rather perfect.
Mhm.
So I'm
Yeah,
curious whether this is a post-processing technique.
could be.
No,
I mean,
I see
the
a
lighting is certainly
reflexive
different.
pattern on the edges.
Yeah, I mean, if it's dark right along the edge of the round part, why isn't it dark on the walls?
Well, so again, my point is just this now that I know that the artist flipped it, now I'm looking at some of the other details going, okay, what other creative aspects did they bring into this image? Now, first of all, I'm going to start with none of these observations detract from the impact of the image.
Mhm.
For me, now this is all just
Mhm.
my opinion, folks.
Mhm.
So I'm looking at this going, okay, now, what other techniques did this artist use that I might want to steal? It's what I was looking at. But I did play around a little bit with maybe a brush again with the luminance masking I was talking about, and darkening that little fringing around this lower part of the
Mhm.
rosette. And it did, I think, make it less noticeable. Was it enough to really worry about? I don't know. It's stained glass. I mean, this kind of artifact is not uncommon in my experience in stained glass. But again, for me, creative image. However much of this was done in post-processing, again, I don't think I care. It's still a creative, impactful image, in
Yeah.
my opinion.
Yeah. I think I might have cleaned up some of the little white spots that might have given it a little more, I don't know, but still it is. I like the shape and I like the colors. It's got good impact.
All right. So one more. This is the last one that was actually submitted. Thoughts?
I like that they captured, was it that osprey coming in? The only thing, and this is just my own personal opinion, I would have left out the lettering, you know, unless it's advertising or something like that. I just think lettering kind of detracts from it, but that's me.
Okay.
Unless it's a sign like the Wall Street sign.
So it could have been an editorial shot. Could have been.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was a shot that was editorialized.
Mm.
I say that as the author of the image.
Mm.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I was interested in hearing feedback from other photographers. You know, I have a booth, a tent, whatever, at the Reston Craft Market at Lake Ann, you know, when there's the farmer's market there in the parking lot on the plaza, there's a craft market. And so I have pretty much nature photography. There's a few other images, but you know, this idea I have is, gee, I wish my images of the natural world, the places I go, you know, would help people kind of feel more connected to nature and, you know, appreciate the beauty and maybe kind of influence some of our attitudes and behavior that are not in the long-term interests of nature or us, since contrary to some opinions, we are part of nature. And so, you know, they say a picture is worth, fill in the blank, 1,000 words, whatever. And I just, a lot of people come by and there are compliments and so forth. I sort of felt the need to, like, okay, let me make it a little more explicit. And, you know, consumers of Earth is kind of, I mean, we're a consumer society, and that's a big part of our lives. And it's sort of like, you know, citizens of Earth and that kind of thing. I was just interested in how people, you know, putting words into a picture is kind of crossing a boundary. So yeah, I was just interested in reaction.
Well, that was just my personal opinion. As part of it is probably because I upload images to Shutterstock, and I have to leave room for words. And you know, sometimes I don't like to do that because I think the image, it takes away from the image to put a great big space for the words.
Yeah. So basically, yeah, you're shooting for editorial use, and you definitely have to consider that type of aspect for that.
Yeah, I like the beauty by itself. I don't know. That's just me.
Yeah. When I saw this, you know, and you know, okay, the editorial part up at the top, I thought was, I was curious whether, you know, now that I know it's Jack, I was curious whether he was trying to fill in that blank, whether this was shot explicitly for this type of purpose of putting some text up there, or if this was just a creative use of that blank space to fill it up. Either way, you know, I thought, again, from an editorial use of the image, I thought it was good. I mean, in terms of leaving room for text, you know, and again, in an editorial type of context for the image. As far as the image itself, I would, yes, it's a little washed out for me. It's a little, it's not enough depth or saturation. So I had played with, just basically just trying, different ways of bringing up a little bit more impact, if you will. So just a couple edits, like, again, I probably took it too far, but just a little bit of
Texture.
That's good. I think it gives it a little more feeling of depth. The background trees, I took that at Blackwater
That's what I thought. Yeah.
National Wildlife Refuge. And I mean, I adapted, there was space there to put words that I wanted to put. And as far as leaving space, the words have to do with leaving space for future generations. So this was not just, oh, here's a nice picture, maybe I'll put words on the top of this. It's
Right.
actually, specifically chosen because it is a picture of 2 generations of a species, and that kind of idea.
The only other, from a technical perspective, I don't know if this is grain that was added intentionally, whether this is, a really tight crop of a large image. If it was intentional grain, I mean, well done. I mean, it's definitely got a filmic look to it. But from a technical, those are the things that I was looking at from a technical perspective. Again, I agree with, was it Patty or Susan that was talking about, perfect timing on the spread of the wings, the curl of the feathers on the wingtips. Got a little bit of the afternoon snack that she just brought back.
Well, mornings, breakfast actually, but yes, pretty large fish. And the grain, I don't know, I think, I mean, it was sort of early in the day.
Yeah, it's only ISO 800, so I don't.
800, okay, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't think this was.
How far away was this? Like what telephoto?
What does it say there, John? I
300 millimeters.
Oh, okay. Wasn't as far away as I thought.
Yeah, I was actually in the car. Well, I think I was draped over the hood of the car on the Wildlife Drive, through there, and it was probably maybe 100 feet away, something like that.
Gosh, that's great. What time of year was it?
July.
July, okay. I've only been in the winter.
Yeah, that looks, I mean, the bird part is improved with your edits. Thank you, John.
All right, those were all of the images that were submitted by members. My apologies, I lost track of time. Frankly, the discussion was that riveting. I lost track of time. My apologies for running long.
Well,
appreciate everybody sticking around to the end. The few of you that did. I'm going to go ahead at this point and stop the recording.